Now on BBC One, David Dimbleby presents Vote 2003.
A big test tonight for the politicians. Nearly 40 million voters have the chance to give their verdict on government and opposition at the halfway point of this Parliament. Well, good evening. They're on tenterhooks tonight at party headquarters for more than one reason. Unlike a general election, though, there's not going to be any outright winner tonight, but all the parties will certainly be claiming, as they always do, what credit they can from the results across Britain. And our job here is to try and make sense of it all. To do that, we'll be watching how votes have been cast for a whole variety of seats. There are elections to local councils today right across England and Scotland. 340 councils will be elected, about 11,700 councillors. No local elections this year, though, in London, Northern Ireland or Wales. In Scotland and Wales, the second elections to the Parliament and Assembly set up 4 years ago. Our reporters are across the country waiting to bring you the results as they come in. In Birmingham, will Labour voters stay at home? Can the Tories take Basildon? Can the Liberal Democrats oust the Tories from Torbay? Will the British National Party keep their seats in Burnley and make gains elsewhere? And we're in Glasgow, where Scottish Socialists, led by Tommy Sheridan, will be pitting their wits against Labour. And in the Rhondda, which Labour is desperate to regain after its shock defeat 4 years ago. Well, needless to say, the big story tonight is the call by Crispin Blunt, who's resigned from the Tory front bench, for Ian Duncan Smith to stand down as leader of the Conservative Party. We've been speaking to him. We'll show you that a bit later on. We haven't had many results in, only 5 so far, but such as they are will pass across the bottom of the screen. And during this evening, we will be analysing everything that comes in, and as ever, Peter Snow will be in charge of that. And here he is. Peter.
And it is indeed the biggest mid-term test for this government for the next general election. Already the results in the key wards we've chosen to give you a representative sample of what's going on are pouring in. 102 wards declared so far. Let's just fill up the ballot box with all the votes. 229,000 in the key wards we've chosen, giving us an indication as to how support has moved since 99, when these seats were last fought. Since that 99 election, Labour appear to be down 2%. The Tories up 1%. It wasn't a very good election for the Tories. Wasn't great for Labour either. Anyway, so a little movement there. Up 1% for the Liberal Democrats. Just to show you what's at stake in this election, very broadly in terms of the councillors, there are the Tories in their heyday, way up the top there, nearly 11,000 councillors. Look how they rush down the screen now as we get to their nadir in 1996. 4,000 councillors then, and the Labour Party up at 11,000. Now, since that terrible time for the Tories, there has been a bit of a recovery. Here they are. They're now sort of halfway back, 7,000 odd councillors, Labour's 8,000, and the Liberal Democrats a little bit tardy recently, down to about 4,000 here. So clearly, the Tories need to pick up substantially tonight if they're going to be anywhere near back to where they were in the early 80s, and the Liberal Democrats need to pick up too. Labour Party could lose a few. It wouldn't do them too much harm. It's also, of course, as David was saying, a historic day in Scotland and in Wales, where the new Parliament buildings will be filling up with the new members of the Scottish Parliament. Not quite ready yet, but it will be soon, we're told. And those doors will open, and in there with the new members of the Scottish Parliament. In here in the Welsh Assembly on Cardiff Bay, again, new building designed but not built yet. We're going to be seeing how the nationalists are doing at the expense of Labour in Scotland and Wales, and also well, some of those other ones are coming in with this proportional representation vote that they have. Now, also, we'll get a picture of the national scene. Our swingometer will tell us whether there's been any shift between the main parties. Difficult to do at a local election, but we have to try. And also, we'll be hearing the results of a poll in which we find Tony Blair is emerging pretty strongly from the war in Iraq. And also, we'll have a measure on our clapometer of the kind of applause that Ian Duncan Smith needs to win if he's to get anywhere near winning the next election if he stays Tory leader. David.
Peter, thanks very much. Well, such a complex series of results as we're going to get tonight. The story is, of course, partly told, perhaps largely told, by lots of facts and figures, but in an odd way just as revealing by the insight of the electorate. And we have been talking already to voters, for instance, in Scotland and Wales, about what they think of devolution.
It's not what they promised us initially.
Most things of that nature, it's a waste of money.
To me, they've done nothing except argue and fight and stab each other in the back.
And we've been finding out what people have to say about their own local councils. We'll be hearing more from them about the councils and the services they think they provide.
I've got my libraries, I use the libraries a lot. I've got police, hopefully.
Well, all we get at the moment is just the rubbish. That's all I can see anyway.
The councillors themselves, I think they're junketing on our council tax.
We'll also be hearing this evening from party workers and from candidates as well as those voters. But of course, the big talking point at the moment is the call from the Tory shadow front bench spokesman Crispin Blunt to stand down and to call for Ian Duncan-Smith to resign, or at least to face a leadership challenge. There'll be a lot of talk about that tonight. I spoke to him just a moment ago and I asked him why he wanted Ian Duncan-Smith to stand down.
We have to be able to go to the country at the next general election with a credible alternative Prime Minister. And Ian, in his own remarks when he became leader of the party, said he had 3 months to make an impact on the public, and that would dictate how he was seen. He made very little impact. And we all thought that was an aberration following the events of the 11th of September 2001, which happened when he was elected. In fact, of course, that analysis has been turned out, frankly, to be correct. And he has not made the necessary impact to give us the credibility of being an alternative government led by someone who can be an alternative Prime Minister. And that is an absolute requirement for us to form the next administration.
What's your evidence that he hasn't made the impact?
I think the evidence is all around us. It's how he is treated by the media. It is obviously the views of my colleagues. It is the views of the voluntary party. It's the views of supporters who are on canvases on the ground. It is even the views of left-wing commentators in the newspapers who are anxious simply for the state of our democracy, for the Conservative Party to be able to be challenging the Labour government in a credible way. And I fear that Ian, for no fault of his own, for things he probably is not able to do anything about to address, is not going to be able to make that impact in order to give us the best chance of winning the next general election. Isn't it rather curious to call for him to stand down on the grounds he's making no impact before you even heard the results of today's elections across Britain, well, which everybody sees as a test of his of the impact he is or isn't making? Well, the relevance of today's election results is really summed up in a letter published in yesterday's Daily Telegraph by a Conservative supporter who wanted to vote to get rid of a Lib Lab council, but was anxious that if he did so, his vote would be taken as a vote of confidence in Ian Duncan-Smith and would then sustain his leadership of the party. And of course, the leadership will want to present the results tonight in the best possible light and as a vote of personal confidence in him. But on what is likely to be a very low turnout, with the voluntary Labour Party almost on strike in England as far as running a campaign is concerned, then we will take, I hope, lots of seats tonight off Labour, but that will not reflect the wider position of the party or our long-term health. Who did you consult before you made the decision to ask for Ian Duncan-Smith to stand down? Informally, we have all been talking to each other as members of Parliament and to, as one does about the state of the party all the time. It's a constant source of conversation. But there isn't a sort of formal consultation process of saying, I'm now formally asking what your view is. You begin to gauge what the views of colleagues are, and the fact is I am afraid that a very large number of my colleagues do realise that Ian Duncan-Smith is not the best person to be leading us into the next general election. Do you have any support, as far as you know, of any of the people who were contenders last time round for the leadership, or indeed of the chairman of the party, or of your immediate boss, Tim Yeo? I have very carefully not sought out people like that in terms of getting their endorsement for what I'm doing. You've got researchers now ringing around the parliamentary party wildly trying to see what people's reaction to what I'm doing is. And you will have realised by now that what I'm doing has obviously come as a surprise, and I have kept this tight, quite precisely because I did not want to undermine the efforts of Conservative candidates, 8,000 of them up and down the country, doing their level best to get elected today. And that's why I haven't said anything until the close of poll today.
Who do you think should succeed Ian Duncan Smith?
It's precisely the point that I can actually go public and say this, is that I don't have a set preference. I found the decision last time extremely difficult. In the first round, I supported Michael Ancram, but he came fifth in the leadership election last time. And I found the choice between Michael Portillo, Ken Clarke and Ian Duncan Smith a very, very difficult one to make on the final parliamentary ballot. On that occasion, I voted for Ken Clarke. When Ken Clarke came up against Ian Duncan Smith in the vote for the party, I watched them both perform at hustings in Crawley, and I came to the conclusion that Ian, on the basis of that performance, should be the leader of the party.
Oh, so you supported Duncan
And I
Smith?
voted for him in that round.
So you made a boob with that then?
Yes, I did make a mistake with that. I mean, undoubtedly, of course I did, as did, and I think a very large number of Conservatives in the country now realise that as well, and a large number of Conservatives in my constituency and elsewhere have made precisely that point to me.
It's known that there are a number of people who would like to lead the Conservative Party if Ian Duncan Smith stood down, for instance. Aren't you embarrassing all of them by jumping the gun and making this announcement tonight? I mean, how would, well, I won't use names because you won't reply to names, but how would some of those people feel? You haven't consulted them. You've suddenly announced that there should be a challenge to the leadership when...
Because the rule, under the constitution of our party, we have to deal with question one, which is whether or not we have confidence in the leader of our party first. If we try,
but you're not a potential leader. Why should you do this?
I'm seeking support from 24 other colleagues to provide the 15% required under our rules in order to do this.
Right.
I wouldn't be doing this as a loyal member of the party with the wider interest of the Conservative Party at heart if I didn't feel it was absolutely necessary in our widest interest to do it. But I believe that I will succeed, and it is why tactically I am using the opportunity of, obviously, of not interfering with the local election campaigns of our candidates by not doing this at 9 o'clock, but obviously seeking the maximum impact now in order to succeed, because I believe I have a duty to make this effort that I'm making succeed in the interests of the party.
So you chose this night of all nights in order to make maximum impact?
Yes, because I think it is quite appropriate. Suppose I had said, as I was requested to do by the leadership, quite understandably, to postpone this, to make this announcement next week. The leadership will quite properly seek to make the best of what happens tonight in the local elections. And you've done enough of these programmes to know that everybody will try and find something in the results to get satisfaction from. And I've watched you enough times come through and say, well, there's a little bit for everybody in this, particularly on local elections where the turnout is so low and it's very difficult to get a clear pattern from the results. And of course, Ian's immediate supporters in the leadership will try and make the best of whatever happens.
So they tried
tonight.
to head you off, you're saying?
Well, no. And if I, having taken this view about my duty to the Conservative Party, if they then if I then tactically cede that ground to them to say it's all been marvellous and allow that story to flow, when we all know that what happens on a 20% poll, if that's what we get tonight, is actually not really of real significance to the future success of the party, then I haven't actually done my cause, which is the widest interest of the Conservative Party, the proper service.
Well, sitting with us here listening to that, Theresa May, the chairman of the Conservative Party, a jolly start to the evening for you?
Well, in a sense, I mean, there's no surprise in it, in that Crispin Blunt has had some disagreements with the leadership on policy issues, particularly on foreign policy, for some time. But what I think is sad is that there are tens of thousands of party members and councillors and candidates up and down the country who've been working so hard who will feel very let down by him tonight.
He made it clear it wasn't any particular disagreement. It was actually Ian Duncan Smith he thought couldn't win an election.
Well, we know that Crispin has had particular disagreements over foreign policy issues, particularly over foreign policy issues with the leadership. I disagree with him. I think Ian Duncan Smith can win an election, and indeed, I think we're on track to do that.
What are his chances of getting 24 other people to go along with him from the backbenches?
I think that is not going to happen. I think this is Crispin Blunt, just a one-off. As I say, I think the people who are going to be really hurt by this are party members who have been campaigning so hard over the past few weeks, who've been working very hard today to get the best result possible, and who will feel very badly let down by Crispin.
Crispin Blunt's boss, Tim Yeo, said just a month or so ago that if you don't make net gains today, then of course there will be searching questions and an inquest afterwards. So he's not actually alone, Crispin Blunt, in worrying about the standing of the party.
Well, I think what we're going to see tonight, as we look across these elections, we know that they're difficult elections for us because the last time most of these seats were up was in 1999 when we made significant gains. So we are starting from a very high base. I think what we're going to see tonight too is a degree of churning. I think there will be councils being lost and won across the board. But what I know from what I've been seeing out on the campaign stump when I've been seeing our activists is that they have put an enormous amount of enthusiasm and hard work in. And one of the very good signs for our party was that we have actually put up 2,000 more candidates than either Labour or the Liberal Democrats. We've had record numbers of candidates standing for this set of elections. And that's a very good sign of a party that is indeed in good heart and in good health.
But all of that there'll be plenty of time to say later, but we have a poll.
I thought I might say it now as well.
Well,
David.
I thought you might be trying to get off a hook. But we have a poll which shows that in terms of, for instance, whether they're a good team, whether they're competent at running the economy, whether they're capable of running the NHS, the Tories score below the Liberal Democrats on all these things. I mean, it's a fantasy to think that everything's fine and
no, it isn't,
rosy,
David, because we've had to come a very long way since, if you think back to that catastrophic election defeat in 1997 and indeed the significant defeat we had in 2001 as well. We have had to come a long way. We have moved quite a long way, but there is of course a way for us to go still. But what I see now on the doorstep, just at this point in time, and I think this is where what Crispin has done is particularly unfortunate because the political environment has changed. There is an opportunity out there for us as a party because just now we're seeing people are really beginning to be fed up with the complete lack of delivery by this Labour government on its promises to improve public services. As people have seen their taxes go up, the money go into public services, but what they see on the ground is that the improvements are not coming through. Okay. And people are simply saying enough is enough.
Okay. Well, John Reid, leader of the House of Commons, Labour of course, you'll be very sad if Ian Duncan Smith is successfully challenged because you make a big thing, and John Prescott was doing it just before these elections, that he's your best weapon.
Well, the Conservatives must choose their own leader, and they continually keep choosing leaders they don't seem to like. I mean, John Major had the problem, Hague had the problem, and now Ian Duncan Smith's got it. And I have to say that actually the problem of the Conservative Party isn't just the inadequacy of its leader. It is the inadequacy of the Conservative Party.
What do you think this...
I was going to commend Theresa because you made the point about them coming behind even the Liberal Democrats in some things. Well, full credit to Theresa because she sits on the board of Conservatives who this week carried out their own analysis of why Conservatives lose. And if you look at this is Conservatives.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that later on. Now, this was not.
But this is a key point that it's not just the leader. If you've got a party still losing in the key issues, losing in the National Health Service, education, as you said, and have the DNA of an unelectable party, an irrelevant, unelectable joke, this is Conservatives who are saying that. So poor Ian Duncan Smith, he's leading a party that is quite frankly unleadable and unsellable.
Simon Hughes, Liberal Democrats Home Affairs spokesman. Do you think he's done the decent thing by putting his marker down to get rid of the Tory leader on this night of all nights?
No, I don't honestly think it's a decent thing to do. I take Theresa's general point that people who are members of parties have a team loyalty and a team obligation, and waiting till the second after the polls close doesn't seem to me to be particularly any more loyal or creditable than doing it a minute before. So I'm sympathetic, but I think the analysis that John gives is, to be honest, one that is widely held, and not just by John's party members and my party members, but by some of Theresa's party members, in fact quite a lot of Theresa's party members. The reality is the Tories are in a perpetual period of difficulty, and the leadership comings and goings and challenges and possible challenges, I honestly don't think fundamentally change that. There is discussion about whom the leader might be. To be honest, any name mentioned doesn't seem to be the rescue package that they would need.
All right, well, we'll come to all of that later, and we'll be hearing from people out in the country in just a moment. Before we do, we should just have a look at what results we've had, because we've had 10 now out of over 300 councils declared, and this is the position, councillors first of all, and now you have to be a bit wary about these changes on the right, because there are over 100 fewer seats this time than there were in 99. So there will be some changes that don't actually add up. If you use the pluses and the minuses, you don't need to be a genius to see that they don't add up to 27 in this case, and it's because some council seats have just fallen out. But anyway, that's the position at very early stage. Labour down 27, the Conservatives up 11, Liberal Democrats up 6, Independents up 4. And let's have a look at the councils themselves. 10 through so far, Labour down 2, Conservatives up 2, and Liberal Democrats down 1 to no overall control. NOC, for beginners in this game, no overall control. A lot of councils don't go straight, of course, from Tory to Labour, or Labour to Liberal Democrat, whatever, but go into a period of no overall control when one party or another, either as a minority, run the council, or perhaps in sort of some kind of coalition. Right, well now let's take up some of the stories that are milling around, including this one about the challenge to the leadership. Vicky Young is at the Prime Minister's constituency tonight of Sedgefield. Laura Trevelyan is in the home territory of the Tory chairman Theresa May in Maidenhead, which the Liberal Democrats have been circling rather hungrily. And Robert Nisbet is in Sheffield, the home city of David Blunkett. Well, let's go first to Laura Trevelyan in Maidenhead. Laura.
Well, of course, as you said, this is a key battleground between the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives. And joining me to discuss the impact of that extraordinary intervention by Mr Blunt are 3 Conservative activists. I have Hannah Parker, who was the chairman of Conservative Future, John Stewart, who was a Conservative councillor, although he has been deselected, although he's still active, and David Burbage, who is still a councillor. Hannah, can I start with you? Mr Blunt says we have no prospect of making progress in the future. What do you agree?
We couldn't hear Theresa May, but, you know, I think the sort of things she says I would agree with, that we have made progress. If you look at the way we selected candidates, the sort of policies we're looking at, the new ideas we've come up with, that is progress. Sadly, Mr Blunt feels it's appropriate to actually make his statement the night of an election result, which, you know, I can't believe that's in the best interest of the party, and it just seems self-motivated.
Can I just ask you, John Stewart, do you agree the Conservatives should change their leader, as Mr Blunt is suggesting?
I think Blunt's intervention is extraordinarily premature and undiplomatic. But basically, he's expressing the views of a huge amount of Conservatives, including myself.
Who do you think should be the leader?
David Davis.
You want to see David Davis?
Yes.
But don't you accept that it's unhelpful of Mr Blunt to be making an intervention like this?
It's unhelpful at this time. But a week from now, we need to get a new leader for the new election. And the quicker we get that, the better.
Do you agree, David Burbage? Time for a new leader? He's basically triggered a leadership contest tonight,
Well,
hasn't he?
I think that also is premature. We don't know whether Crispin Blunt has got a lot of people behind him or no people behind him. And if IDS does well tonight, I think this will all melt away into the history of politics.
Hannah, you're a young Conservative, you're the face of the future, you're on the list, you could be an MP in a few years' time. Do you think Ian Duncan-Smith should be leading the party?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of a leadership contest now is just ridiculous. We're actually beginning to make headway. You know, we have a lot of good relationships that we need to build with the public. We know that, Ian's looking at that. But for Crispin Blunt, who's someone who doesn't represent progress, he's not been involved in any of these forward-thinking things, he's not somebody you see out and about. I just think it's ridiculous.
John Stewart, Crispin Blunt doesn't represent progress, he's one of the old guard, yet you agree with him, don't you? You think there should be a change of leader?
Yes, but not him.
No, I don't think he's putting himself forward as leader.
No, absolutely not. He's a retread, and we don't want retreads, including Kenneth Clark.
Is there a bandwagon behind David Davis, do you think, among activists on the ground?
There's a bandwagon in favour of a change. Whether it's Davis or anyone else, it's a change. Duncan Smith has been a big disappointment to a lot of people, including myself. I voted for him and was a strong supporter of Duncan Smith, and he's let me down entirely, and a lot of other people.
David Burbage, do you feel the Conservatives have made any progress under Ian Duncan-Smith?
Oh, I think we have. We've got a whole raft of new policies. We've announced a lot of new initiatives.
Yet you're not moving in the polls.
We are moving slowly upwards, I think you'll find, and tonight, if we make gains, we're going in the right direction.
Well, thank you all very much, and David, back to you.
And we'll be down there again, no doubt. We go now to Sheffield and join Robert Nisbet. Robert.
Well, David, we've achieved quite a coup here this evening. We've managed to persuade 30 under 25-year-olds to come to a bar. In return, they're going to be telling us about their political views, whether they're turned on by politics at all, whether they're bored by the 3 main political parties, and whether they think the real political muscle now relies on showing your feelings on the street, as we saw on today's May Day protest. Well, let's dive in here. I'm a little nervous, but let's dive in and ask whether anybody voted, for starters. Guys, hello, can I interrupt? Did you vote today?
I didn't, no.
Why didn't you vote?
Because I'm a student in Sheffield, I didn't feel I had a vested interest in voting around Sheffield. I felt if I was at home, then yeah, maybe, but not while I'm in somewhere I don't live full time. So.
And does that go for all of you?
Well, I did vote today, yeah, because I don't think I'm bored enough with politics yet. I'm a little bit bored of politicians, but I've still got a bit of an interest in politics, so I voted today.
That's very good. Congratulations. Did you use... There's a pilot scheme here, isn't there, for e-voting, the smart cards. Did you use that?
I used my smart card today, yeah. It's quite good, actually. You just had to put in a little box, and then your details are on the screen. It was wonderful.
And there are other ways you can do it, like text message and...
Yeah, we got a letter through about that. There was all manner of ways, but the voting station was about 50 yards from our front door, so it was not a problem to vote in there.
Well, terrific. We're going to be hearing more views, a little like that. We're going to be finding out whether the war in Iraq changed people's views as well throughout the course of the programme. David.
Thank you very much. Well, Vicky Young is in Sedgefield, Tony Blair's constituency, there to gauge feeling in the Labour Party about the Prime Minister's record 2 years into the Parliament, one of the key things in this election today, and, of course, in the wake of the invasion of Iraq. Let's go up there, Vicky.
And what better place to come than Tony Blair's own backyard, here in the local pub. Reaction to the war in Iraq has been as divided as it has been everywhere else in the country. But it's not just about voters, it's about Labour Party activists and also the personal standing of the Prime Minister himself. I've got two people who don't exactly agree on that. First of all, John Burton. It was a real political risk for Tony Blair, this military action. Do you think it's paid off?
I think it has paid off. I think people respect him for what he stood for. That they realised that the future of the children and grandchildren was at stake, and that he stood up against terrorism and against an evil dictator. And I think, in some ways, it hasn't played a great part in the local elections here.
John Gilmore, do you agree people like a strong leader who takes difficult decisions?
I think Conservative people like a strong leader. They like Margaret Thatcher, but I don't think the Labour movement likes a strong leader. The Labour movement's a democratic organisation, has been since it was founded right from the beginning. And strong leadership is not something that people want. What people want is, is democracy, and also, and Blair went against international law, and he went against the will of the Labour movement by going to war, and I think it was appalling.
Very briefly, he ignored Labour Party members, didn't he, Mr Blair?
No, he didn't ignore Labour Party members. In fact, I've checked up and I was a little bit surprised that membership of the Labour Party has gone up regularly over the last 50 weeks or so, and he has the support of Labour Party members.
So very lively and different views there. We can promise you a lot more of that later on.
Which one do we get here? So, we just had some news, incidentally, that these are just hot tips, so to speak. First results from Sheffield suggesting that, like last time, the Liberal Democrats may be losing there and Labour may actually take overall control. And the Conservatives could lose Carlisle City Council to no overall control. That's just first indications. But let's try and get some markers now, because we've got over 300 councils to come in. We've got over 11,000 councillors, and the key thing is how to look at this. Peter.
Well, David, 156 odd key wards are declared so far. The votes are pouring in as they come in, so we can build a more accurate picture of what's happened since 1999. 366,000 votes. And here's the picture now. It'll vary a little as we go on, and we're building up now to that important moment on the night when we get the projected national share, which gives us the position of the parties projected all over the country. 1% up the Conservatives on 1999. The Labour Party down 3%, doing particularly badly in the Midlands, I understand. The Liberal Democrats up 2% and no change for the others. Now, as David said, what's at stake for the parties? How to judge the way the parties are doing in these local elections. The Labour Party can afford to lose some seats. If they get 400 net gains or so by the end of the night, a lucky escape for them. If they get more than that, then it gets a little bit nerving, up to about 800 losses, net losses. That'll be pretty damaging for them. Over 800 losses really would be a severe setback for the Labour Party, even though they are placed better than all the other parties at the moment in terms of councillors. The Tories simply, as I said earlier, cannot afford to lose any seats. That would be a disaster for them. They say they're going to win 30. Well, that, of course, is probably a massive underestimate. They really ought to win at least 200 to be convincing, as you can see. If they win more than 200, up to about 500 seats, net gains over the night, then think of that as a promising result for the Tories. Over 500, up here somewhere, 500 or more, would be a real success for Ian Duncan Smith's Tories. They'd be pretty glad to see that. Liberal Democrats, again, they can't, as I said earlier, really afford to lose a few seats. They haven't got much above where they were in the mid-90s. They need to win more. They need something like 300 to look respectable, and they'll be on a roll. They'll be doing very well indeed if they can get over 300 net gains, David.
Thanks very much, Peter. A bit of news. The British National Party have taken one seat in Broxbourne in Hertfordshire. We'll be watching how the British National Party does tonight. The Liberal Democrats are doing rather well in Birmingham. Labour's lost 5 seats so far in Birmingham, 3 to the Liberal Democrats, 2 to the Conservatives, and it looks as if Labour might lose control of the council. And the suggestion of the BBC's analysis of key wards in this election is that the Conservatives aren't making very much progress and may be struggling to advance on what they did 4 years ago. Well, now let's go around the country and hear from some people about these issues. We join Jonathan Beale in Basildon first.
Well, David, we've just heard from the Tories that they believe they've gained 2 seats from Labour. Remember, this is Basildon, the barometer often of national political opinion. The last time the Tories won the parliamentary seat here in Basildon was 1992. That's also the last time they held the council here. Now, Labour's been running things all the way until recently. They've lost their grip over the last year of the council. One Labour councillor resigned over the war in Iraq, but what we're hearing tonight, they needed 1 extra seat, the Conservatives. We hear they've got 2 gains from Labour. So Ian Duncan-Smith definitely needed this council tonight, and it seems that they have done just enough.
Thanks so much. Well, let's now go to Birmingham and join John Sudworth. John.
Well, David, pretty grim news for the Labour Party here in Birmingham. They've lost 8 seats so far out of a total of the 26 they were defending here tonight. If they lose another 2, they'll lose overall control of the council, which they've held here for donkey's years, well, since 1983 to be precise. And that will, of course, be a huge fillip to the Conservative Party. This is the largest metropolitan council outside of London. But it's interesting in that most of the gains so far have been because of Liberal Democrat success rather than Conservative swings towards away from Labour. And there's speculation that what we may be seeing here is the anti-war vote effect. Many of the Labour losses have occurred in city centre areas with large Muslim populations, and the feeling is that the Liberal Democrats have capitalised on that anti-war vote at Labour's expense. So just 2 more seats Labour need to lose here to lose control of the council. And I can also tell you that we've just heard from Stoke that the BNP have gained a seat on Stoke, and that was what a lot of people were fearing. If they were going to win a seat in the West Midlands, Stoke looked like the most likely place, and we've just heard that in fact the BNP have won a seat on Stoke.
Thanks very much. Well, now we join Mark Mardell in Burnley, where the BNP, of course, had 3 seats last year. 2 of the candidates are standing now, and you've heard the news about those 2 other BNP candidates. But how are things generally in Burnley, Mark?
Well, because the BNP are making a great push all over the country, 221 candidates, and they're trying to say, we're not a racist party, we're not a fascist party, we're pretty respectable. Now here, as you say, they had 3 candidates, they won that last year, and they're fighting, there's 15 wards up for grab, and they're fighting 13 of them, so fighting pretty hard here. The feeling generally from the other parties is that there'll be churn around and the BNP will still end up with 3, maybe 4 seats. Certainly people have just been called up from one of the wards they're most hopeful about here, and they're looking, the BNP people are looking pretty chipper, pretty cheerful, and they say they're going to make great gains from the way that they're talking on the doorstep. But certainly people here are saying that they don't think there will be that many gains, but look for places like Halifax and Calderdale in West Yorkshire, and also Sunderland and Newcastle. I don't think they'll get seats there, but a big share of the vote. I think it was 16%, which is quite a lot for a party like the BNP.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, now, I haven't introduced the other side of this distinguished table, which I better do right away. Andrew Marr, well known to you, BBC political editor. Anthony King, Professor of Government at Essex University, who's sat through many of these local election nights. But a newcomer we're very glad to have with us, Pippa Norris, who's a Professor of Political Science at Harvard, who tells me she's written 30 or more books about politics one way or another. So let's start with you, since you're the newcomer, and welcome.
Thank you.
What do you expect to be able to tell from the results tonight?
Well, we know that this is the midterm, so we really are expecting that the government normally does have something of a fall in its support. And really the question is the size of the fall and who's going to benefit. And so when we look at the popular vote, as Peter Snow has, so far what we can see is that there are some shifts, but basically it's very much in line with the opinion polls. There's no big surprises so far, but that will have to settle down. We're also going to look, obviously, at things like turnout. So far, the indications are about 1 in 3 voters have probably turned out in the English councils, and that's about average for these sorts of contests.
How much does this give an indication of what could happen 2 years ago at a general election? In 2 years' time, rather.
I mean, local elections are local elections. There's all sorts of factors which will go into those, and therefore they are difficult to generalise. The share of the vote is probably one of the best indicators, because that is the sort of thing, and that's the change since the last general election to now. So we can say, how is that going? And so far, essentially what the pattern seems to be is the Conservatives are more or less flatlining. Some damage to Labour, but nothing like the normal sort of mid-term damage, and some gains to the Lib Dems. But the other thing, we also have to look at the seats. In particular, what the polls do and the overall share of the vote, it can't really look at the minor parties. And often in local elections, they make gains. So we're going to look in particular in these elections at things like the Greens. We're going to look at the Scottish Socialists and the BNP. And as we've seen, if the BNP makes any sort of gains, then that really is worth looking at.
Andrew Marr, I mean, that's the psephologist's view, the political scientist's view of an election. Down at Westminster, how do they look at it? Like that, or are they much more visceral about it?
Well, they do. I mean, the most important thing to say, I think, is that these are not national opinion polls. These are local elections. People are actually choosing councils which are going to deal with their rubbish and their schools and their police and all sorts of things. And everywhere around the country, there are local issues that we round this table, frankly, don't know about.
You really believe that? You think
absolutely.
But I mean, lots of places people say they haven't the slightest clue what their council does.
Give you
and other issues, they believe central government does it even though they pretend the local council does it.
Give you an example, David. You and I both know Richmond upon Thames, one way and another. At the last round of local elections, people were surprised by what happened there. The Liberal Democrats had a very, very bad night. Now, I happen to know that that was about a whole series of local issues which were very hot there. That's because I live there. But right across the country, there are similar cases. There are big rows about bypasses, big rows about policing, big rows about rubbish collection, big rows about local council corruption or whatever it might be. Now, it's dangerous simply to ignore that, to push it to one side and say this is effectively an opinion poll and we can look simply at the raw numbers and think about this as a sort of pretend version of a general election.
So if what you're saying is true, we shouldn't take any account of the popular vote?
Well, we can sit around and talk about anything we like, including the popular vote. All I'm saying is that people go out on a day like today to choose the councils which will affect their lives. And I think sitting in London, we ignore that at our peril.
Tony King?
I agree entirely with that, except that if you take as a totality the local votes that are cast, you have a pretty good idea, given that a lot of these local things cancel out, of the political mood of the country. Now, if that's right, the Conservatives at the moment are not doing terribly well. As Peter Snow pointed out a few moments ago, it looks from our preliminary analysis of the key wards that the Tory share of the vote has gone up from a not magnificent 33% 4 years ago, which Theresa May said was a good year for the Tories, to a not very magnificent 34%. Now, if that's all the progress that the Conservative Party can make, given that this is not a desperately popular government, given that you would expect, as Pippa said a moment ago, a mid-term swing to the principal opposition party, then there are Tory difficulties.
Can I bowl a googly? The 2000 locals, the popular vote as analysed, which we'll be seeing in a moment. Labour 29%, Tories 38%. 1 year later, general election, Labour 42%, Tories 33%. I mean, that proves Andrew's point.
It certainly points up the fact that local elections are not national elections. But the fact still remains that voters typically use local elections as a way of punishing the incumbent government. Most people in this country blame the Whitehall government, the Westminster government, for the fact that council taxes were going up. And yet their response is not to turn to the principal opposition party, it's to turn a bit against the government, but apparently, as of now, more to the Liberal Democrats.
Okay. We've just had news that the Conservatives have gained Basildon, which you saw go across the screen a moment ago. Peter Snow has a way of looking at all this. We were talking about the share of the vote, and we can extrapolate from these wards. Peter, can you do that for us? No? we haven't got him there, I'm afraid. Sad. Let's just have a look then while we're waiting to get hold of Peter Snow about the councillors. We've had 20 councils in now, and so far Labour are down 45, the Conservatives up 22, Liberal Democrats up 9. And what do you three politicians make of it all so far? Yes, Simon Hughes.
Andrew's right, we're all agreed that local issues matter. I went to one place on the south coast, which should be nameless, where the issue was a cannabis cafe. Actually nothing to do with the local council, a matter the police were trying to deal with. But that was the issue which most people mentioned in a very respectable suburban part of a south coast resort. The thing that, however, I do think will have an impact in urban Britain a lot this time, to a varying extent, will have been the last 3 months of the war, to an unusual extent. Foreign policy doesn't normally impact. Domestic policy, taxes and council tax and health service and education. But I think you will find that in some places that will have had more, clearly faith communities regard that as an issue that they may be more influenced by. And you may find that in some places that is an unusual variation. Okay. Doesn't take away from the local separate issues in separate places. I'll
bring you, the two of you, in just a second, but let's just hear from Peter Snow, who we have now rejoined, and then I'll come back to you. Peter.
David, very quickly, we do now have enough information in. 246 was declared. Votes pouring in now well over 500,000 votes, and we can now estimate what the projected national share for all parties is. In other words, who is, in a sense, the winner of the share, likely to emerge out of these local elections as the winner of the share. Narrowly, as you can see, the Conservatives with some 34%, 31% the Labour Party, and 30% the Liberal Democrats. Now, that would be the best ever Liberal Democrat local election performance if that settles down through the night. Pretty poor for Labour, but they are in mid-term, and here are the Tories on 34%. They may look like the winners, but to win a general election they need to be on 42%, just to give you some indication. So there we are. There's the first sign of the projected share, David, of the vote.
Peter. Theresa May.
Yes, indeed. If I could pick up some of the points that were made, I think there are two elements that we see in local elections that we saw last year and have been translated into the local elections this year as well. The first is that these are, as Andrew says, genuinely about local issues. I mean, indeed, we as a party campaigned on local issues rather than on national issues. People are going out to decide who they want to have as their councillors and their overall council. But the second feature is that there is a vote against incumbency at local government level. I mean, this was one of the features from last year, and I think that's one of the features that we're seeing coming through this year. And that's why I think we will have this significant amount of churning across the country. I mean, there will be, we've had some good results already, but there will be some seats where some councils where we won't do so well. The same will be true, I think, across the board. There is going to be a lot of churning.
John Reid, our backroom analysis is suggesting that the Labour Party's share of the vote is falling more heavily in local authorities with a large Muslim community. Do you think you're suffering for the war on Iraq?
I'd prefer, I think, to see the vote at the end of the night. I mean, that is possible. In some areas we would gain, and in some areas we might lose. It would be ironic if we were losing a vote in the Muslim community for standing up and removing a man who, Saddam Hussein, who killed and murdered more Muslims than anyone else in the world who's alive, if he is still alive. Can I just say on the overall projections, I don't think I've ever agreed with all three of your independent commentators at the same time, and I did tonight. I found that amazingly. Especially, I mean, Pippa made the point that we would expect, and I certainly would expect tonight, to have a pretty hard time. We're in the mid-term. We are going through some unpopular decisions in reform of the public services. In the long run, they will bear fruit, but like the economy and like the war, in the first instance, they're unpopular. There's a low turnout, so that normally works differentially against us. And therefore, I was prepared tonight for a pretty, difficult and robust attack from the Conservatives. Now, from what we're seeing so far, they are 5% beneath what William Hague gained the year before he was slaughtered in the general election. So it's a pretty bad night for the Conservatives, and one of the disservices, I'm afraid, that Blunt has done, Crispin Blunt has done, is to reinforce the concentration on tonight's vote as an indicator of whether Ian Duncan Smith is doing well or not. And I think from tonight's vote, unfortunately for him, I think Crispin Blunt has been proven more right than Ian Duncan Smith's supporters.
Except that they are stacking up gains in councils and gains in councillors.
Well, the last one that we got there in councils was Basildon, wasn't it? Which you can think is a great victory until you recognise, first of all, that Basildon had no overall control. We didn't control it. And I think from memory, it only took one Conservative seat gain to take control of it. So it isn't the greatest ever electoral victory. But nevertheless, it is a movement forward. The Liberals are moving forward as well, but nothing like I would have expected tonight in mid-term for an incumbent government.
Okay, we'll come back. On with the story. Mark Mardell again in Burnley. Mark.
Yes, the BNP has won one of its target wards here and actually kicked out the deputy Labour leader of the council. So they've won that one, and it looks to me from the activity that's going down there that one of their councillors who won last time and moved to a different ward has also won. I think that she's been told that unofficially. So it looks as though the BNP are, in a sense, making gains. They may not end up with more than the 3 seats that they had last time, but they're getting new wards, and it looks like their tactic of talking as much about disposal of rubbish, as much as about bureaucracy as about asylum seeking and race, although they do talk about that as well. It looks as though that is picking up disillusioned Labour voters.
Good, well I think we can now go to Leicester. We were talking about what had happened in areas with a large Muslim community just a moment ago. Zainab Badawi is in Leicester. Zainab, are you with us?
I am, yes, David. Well, if hostility to the war on Iraq is going to damage Labour's chances, then Leicester is the place to watch. More than 1 in 3 people here is from an ethnic minority background, and around 12% are Muslim. And the Lib Dems, of course, who are very opposed to the war, have a real chance of winning control of Leicester City Council. Now, Leicester City Council has been in Labour Party hands for nearly a quarter of a century. They lost their knife-edge majority last year in a by-election, so the Lib Dems really think they've got a chance of winning on this issue of the war on Iraq. And there are some very nervous Labour Party people behind me waiting for the count. We only think the turnout, we think, has been quite low, though interestingly enough, turnout has been quite high, we believe, in the Muslim areas. Keith Baz, you're a local MP. How worried are you that Labour might lose this over the war on Iraq?
Well, I'm not worried about it. It is a factor. Clearly, in some Muslim wards where there is a large Muslim population, they have decided to vote for the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats are the scavengers of British politics. They will jump on any issue that is around.
Well, they said they were principled in their stand against the war.
Their stand changed significantly. I was in favour of what the government did. I think that people should have waited to pass judgment on our achievements in the last 4 years and what we have achieved. And on Iraq, they should have waited to see what's going to happen. But clearly, people have voted Liberal Democrat here. It is a factor, and it may affect the outcome in some of the wards.
Mansour Mogul, you are a Labour Party supporter also. Do you believe that the Iraq war has been a factor, or do you think that people were losing support for the Labour Party anyway?
No, it's been a major factor. The anti-Labour sentiment in the Muslim community is very worrying. I cannot say what the scale of the revolt is, but my own assessment is that having spoken to many voters, once they begin to understand the complexity of the problems, they come back to the Labour Party. They have been misguided by this anti-war sentiment, which is being exploited very selfishly by the Liberal Democrats, and that is what worries us all the time.
Is it just the Muslims in Leicester City, or is it people from all sorts of ethnic minorities who are opposed to the war?
It's mostly the Muslims, and there is a big turnout of Muslim voters in Muslim areas, especially the women voters. I've never seen so many Muslim women voting in these areas at all.
Keith Basso, it's baffling because, I mean, the war on Iraq is hardly a bread and butter issue. Why is it the priority, it would seem, for Muslims in Leicester?
Because the Liberal Democrats chose to exploit that here in other parts of the country. It's clearly there is a resonance with the Muslim community. I think that we made the case very well nationally and internationally. What we should do now is to explain to the Muslim community why we went in there, why it was important to topple Saddam Hussein, and what we can achieve for the people of Iraq, for them to elect a government, for them to be part of a new Iraq. But you know that in other parts of my constituency in the city, this has been the middle of a term for a government. As you said, Labour has been in power for a long time. There is a degree of apathy, and we've had a tremendous council, but the trouble is, things do change. There is a pendulum.
Briefly, Mansour Mogu, do you think that people here in Leicester are beginning to put foreign policy concerns above things like housing, education, hospitals?
International events and foreign policy are in the news all the time, and especially the Iraq war has been something which has been exercising the minds of people all the time, and that's why it figures so largely in these elections.
I also have with me Patricia Hewitt. You're also a local MP, but of course a cabinet minister. Do you think the government should have done enough to sell the war on Iraq to the people of Leicester?
I think Tony Blair has made the arguments for our intervention in Iraq very, very powerfully, and indeed has won a great deal of respect for doing so.
Not cut much ice, though, with Muslims in your neck of the woods.
For very obvious reasons. Iraq is a Muslim country. Local Muslims have been very, very concerned, many of them very opposed to the war. But I have to say, for the vast majority of people in my own constituency in Leicester, the war has simply not been the factor. And for them, it's been about local public services, particularly policing and crime and education and health. And I have to say that that confirms in my mind that as a government, we're on the right track, making our number one priority, not only putting more money into the public services, but delivering the reform that will actually enable us to improve the public services in the ways people want.
Patricia Hewitt, thank you very much. Well, the Labour Party here will hope, of course, that Blair's Baghdad bounce will reach all the way to Leicester. The only problem for them is the ball might actually end up in the court of the Lib Dems. We'll keep you posted.
Zainab, thank you very much. Eastbourne in East Sussex had the highest increase in its council tax of all those councils being voted on today. The Liberal Democrats, however, did not lose it, as some people thought they might. To the Conservatives, they've held on in Eastbourne. Let's go to Bristol now and join Clarence Mitchell. Clarence.
David, I have to tell you, it's been another bad night for Labour here in Bristol. Until tonight, they had overall control of the council with the slimmest of majorities. Just 2 seats separated them from the other parties in terms of overall power. They were fearful beforehand they would do badly. In fact, before the ballot boxes were arriving, they were talking of perhaps losing 6 to 8 seats. And it seems that events have borne that out. We know of at least 5 losses for Labour so far this evening. 4 of those Liberal Democrat gains, 1 a Tory gain, and that means that Bristol City Council is now a no overall control council. No one party is in charge. The Labour Party are saying the war wasn't so much a factor. This was an election fought on local issues, but it's clear that many of their activists were extremely disillusioned with the government's action in Iraq. They made it clear in statements before, during and after the outbreak of hostilities that they were opposed to it. And it's quite likely that many activists chose not to take to the streets and not to get that vital Labour vote out where in a city where every vote was quite critical. Now, I'm joined by Paul Smith, who is the chair of the Labour Party here in Bristol. Mr. Smith, a bad night for you. There's no hiding it, is there?
Yeah, it's a terrible night for Labour in Bristol, although it's very much a repetition of what happened last year in our elections, where we lost 4. Tonight we've lost 5. There wasn't a war last year, and I think that the war hasn't made any difference in the number of seats we lost. It may have made a difference to the majorities in some of those seats, but we would have lost them anyway.
But you can't deny that many of your activists were very unhappy with the war, and some will have chosen not to take to the streets in any shape or form to help the party tonight.
I think we've had the same number of activists out this year as last year, and I've been fighting alongside people who were very strongly in favour of the war and people who are violently opposed to it. I think in general in Bristol there was a view it should have been a UN war if there was going to be a war at all. But I really don't think that was the issue. I think what people said is that Labour's been in control of Bristol for a very long time. As far as they're concerned, we haven't achieved enough for that period of control, and they want to give somebody else a chance.
But you've been in power here for, what, some 19 years unbroken, and in fact almost the last 30 years, bar the odd year or so. This really is the end of an era for Labour in the city, and are you fearful that that perhaps will be reflected in a couple of years' time come a general election?
I don't think it'll be reflected in a general election. I think a lot of people are waiting to see if the huge investment that Labour's putting into public services will make a difference. If it doesn't make a difference, yes, we'll have problems in the same way that we've had here in the council. But I think most party members are fairly confident that the extra money going into health and education will bring results. So I'm not particularly worried about general election. We've got lots of people saying we'll vote for you at the national level, but we won't vote for you at local because you're not achieving.
Paul Smith, many thanks indeed for that. So the results still coming here in Bristol, but I can tell you Bristol is now a council with no overall control.
Thanks very much, Clarence. We've just been hearing that the BNP leader, Nick Griffin, has not taken the seat in Oldham that he was fighting. And now at this stage we go to Scotland, because we won't get any results of local elections in Scotland tonight, but all eyes are on the Scottish Parliament after its first 4 years and the battles for seats there, the first past the post battles and the regional battle that takes place, which kind of is a topping up system, a sort of PR. Sally Magnuson's in Glasgow. Sally, good evening and welcome to this programme, and glad we got to you. What's the story tonight as far as you can tell?
Well, we've just had one result so far. We've had Hamilton South, which is always first to declare in Scotland and very proud of it, and that's been a Labour win as expected. It's looks as if there's going to be no great seismic change in the political landscape in Scotland. The opinion polls all suggest that Labour will remain the biggest party, with Jack McConnell continuing to be First Minister, and in the fullness of time going into coalition again, probably with the Liberal Democrats. It's been a curiously flat election time really in Scotland. After all the optimism and the excitement of the first elections 4 years ago to the new devolved Parliament, this one has been characterised really, I think you could say, by voter frustration. Frustration at the performance of the Parliament itself, which is considered not to have achieved very much, but frustration at the choices offered by the four main parties, which have been very similar in essence, a variation on how many different ways you can squeeze more nurses and teachers and policemen out of the Scottish Bloc grant, and frustration too at the performance of the leaders who've not been able to offer any great sense of a vision for Scotland ahead. So people have approached this election in a rather flat way, and I think that's going to be reflected tonight in the turnout, which looks already as if it could be under 50%. Here in Glasgow, they were talking at 9 o'clock in a straw poll of a turnout of 39%. Now the story, one of the stories of the night is going to be how that turnout impacts on Labour's vote. It's usually rather bad for Labour when the turnout is low, and also how it affects the chances of the minority parties, in particular the Scottish Socialist Party, run by the rather dazzling Tommy Sheridan, who's done very well in his sole seat in the last Parliament. He was the leader and he's made quite an impact on the Scottish scene. He is hoping, he's saying tonight, that he will have picked up at least 4 seats, possibly 2 in Glasgow, one his own, and another one, and another 2 in the country, and possibly more. He's very up tonight. The other story will be how many constituency seats the SNP can pick up. They've got to win seats like Aberdeen North, Dundee West, Glasgow Govan here, if they are to present a really strong electoral challenge to Labour.
Thanks very much, Sally. Well, let's just have a look now at how things stand at this stage. Councillors, first of all, 51 councillors have come in, Labour down 76, and the Conservatives up 40, Liberal Democrats up 21. Remember what I said about over 100 of these seats falling because the boundary changes. They don't necessarily add up, but that's how it's looking at the moment. And in terms of councils, Labour down 5, the Conservatives up 7, Liberal Democrats down 1. Turnout, the early indications is that it's running at about 30%, similar to levels in 99 and the 2002 elections. Now, I should also say it's being reported to us that for the first time since 1984, it looks as though Labour may have lost control of Birmingham. That will be a big blow to Labour. Here are some of tomorrow morning's papers. The Times, Tory leader resigns and tells his leader to go. The Guardian says, is he a joke or a real threat? And Telegraph, Tory quits front bench and calls Duncan Smith a fatal handicap. Tory frontbencher quits with call to oust Duncan Smith. I don't know what I said there, said something odd. Tory resigns and tells his leader to go. Shadow Energy Minister, Times move to destabilise Duncan Smith. There we are. Well, now look, in the next hour or so, we'll have many more results in from all over the country, so stay with us. We'll find out what services people really think their councils provide, in view of what Andy Marr was saying about them, whether they're doing a good job. We'll have comment on the effect of devolution on Scotland and Wales, and we'll hear many more from the politically engaged people, the candidates, the party workers and the students, as we have been. But it's time now for an update on what's happening in your own region.
Welcome to BBC London's local election coverage. Even before the announcement of Crispin Blunt's resignation, the issue tonight in our area was always going to be how much headway, if any, the Conservatives were going to make. Of course, there are no elections in London this year, but of the 34 councils outside the capital, as the night started, the Conservatives controlled 14. 13 are under no overall control. Labour ran 3, the Liberal Democrats 2, and residents' associations another 2. The latest results show that the Tories have taken Basildon, which they last held in 1992. In Broxbourne in Hertfordshire, the BNP has picked up a seat. Let's go straight away to one of the key battlegrounds tonight, Guildford. Carl Mercer is there now. Carl, what can you tell us?
Well, this was going to be the Lib Dems' gateway to this home counties, gateway to Surrey, if you like. They were hoping to make big gains here. They've been running the council under a minority administration, and they thought off the back of winning the parliamentary seat here 2 years ago, they'd waltz into power. But it doesn't seem to be the case. The Tories seem to be bucking the national trend and picking up seats here, and so far they've picked up something like 4 or 5 of the key wards from the Lib Dems, and they say they look like sort of pulling the Lib Dems back in, if you like, and it looks like the council is going to remain in no overall control rather than going yellow.
The Surrey Tories must be reeling from the resignation of Crispin Blunt. What's it been like there tonight?
Well, Crispin Blunt said it was something of a surprise, and he thought it would be to Tory members. Not a pleasant one for the people that I spoke to here tonight. They heard nothing about his resignation until I told them, and they said, what a time to do it. Why is he doing it now at a time when we feel we're winning back this county? It's going to do untold damage, not in these local elections, but could do untold damage to the Tory party in Surrey when it comes up to the general election. And they're saying, look, we're trying to build on local election results, we're trying to get hold of councils here. What a fool that he's gone ahead and done this at a time like this.
What timing. Thanks very much for that, Carl. Well, let's go now to our reporter Nicola Pearson in Chelmsford.
Well, here in Chelmsford, the count is well underway. There are 57 seats up for grabs here tonight. Now, currently, the Liberal Democrats are running the council with 3 independent candidates. There is no overall control here, but that's what the Liberal Democrats are hoping. They want to be running the council on their own. However, they're facing stiff opposition from the Conservatives, who also want to have overall control. So we're going to have to wait and see really what happens here. It could be a very close call. Now, the turnout, 1999, 32% of people eligible to vote turned out, and the council have hoped that many more people will have voted tonight.
Well, we've just heard that Epping Forest, there's no change, no overall control. Our political editor Tim Donovan comes into his own tonight, joins us now. News of a BNP gain.
Yeah, in Broxbourne in Hertfordshire, this is a solid Conservative territory. They had a majority of 32 before tonight, but the BNP have picked up a seat, and the significance of that is that in this sort of London area, or just outside London, they haven't had a candidate, they haven't had a successful councillor since Derek Beacon in Tower Hamlets in more than 10 years ago. So this is, from their point of view, will be seen as a sort of breakthrough in this territory.
A success for them. What about Labour? Are they worried tonight?
They're going to be worried more nationally than they are around our area. They hold Slough, they hold Stevenage, which they've held again tonight, and they hold Watford. But apart from that, they've never, they're not doing very well in this area anyway. So they've got less to lose. So from their point of view, so far this evening, isn't any worse than it would be expected.
So where are the major battlegrounds? Do you think the Tories will make any gains at all?
Well, the Conservatives, a good result for them already that's come through is Basildon. They needed 1 seat to take control. Basildon's sort of quite totemic in many ways. Its significance is it indicated when the parliamentary seat went in 1992 that John Manger had held on. The Conservatives have wanted to win that back, and by doing that tonight, that will be a major result. But they also hope to pick up places like Woking. We've just heard Woking has remained no overall control. Now, Conservatives only needed 2 seats to take a seat like that, a council like that, in Surrey. Certainly a seat they would have expected to pick up. Epping Forest, we say no overall control. Yeah. They could have. There were a few seats they would have needed to take there, but they've held on to places like Hertsmere, which they took from Labour last time.
What about the Lib Dems, finally?
Liberal Democrats, so far, not much to say about them yet. We can't quite tell how they're doing. Chelmsford's going to be their key seat, like Guildford, but they have lost control of Brentwood in Essex. That's gone to no overall control.
OK, hope to come back to you later, Tim. Thanks for that. Now, we can move you on to let's get more on the fight between the Tories and the Lib Dems. We're off to Windsor and Maidenhead now. Mike Ramsden's there for us. Mike, what's the main story there? The future of the town hall hangs in the balance, the actual building, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. The Lib Dems want to keep it, the Conservatives want to knock it down and redevelop the whole of Maidenhead. Also on offer tonight, of course, overall control of the council. The Conservatives just 1 seat away from control of the council, the Lib Dems 9 seats away. With me is Christine Bason, from the Deputy Leader of the Conservative councillors here. Why do you want to knock the town hall down?
Because it's old and inadequate. In fact, it was built in 1962 of a 1930s design for about 20 councillors. And in that, since then, it's gone from a district council to a borough council and now to a unitary. And in fact, our staff are housed in about 8 buildings in Maidenhead. So it's inefficient to have so many buildings. So we want to knock down the town hall and put up one purpose-built building for the staff.
People say it's a local landmark, though. It's used in the Carry On films.
Well, the thing is that we feel that it will revitalise Maidenhead. Maidenhead needs revitalising, needs a department store, more shops in it, and we feel we will be able to do that with a centre point, which is the town hall.
Christine, thank you very much. No results here at Maidenhead and Windsor yet. We'll bring you those when we get them.
Thanks very much for that, Mike. Well, let's talk to Tim again. Some problems with voting, I understand. Bit of technical hitches here and there?
Absolutely, and this election was the biggest experiment in alternative voting methods, from e-counting, internet voting, postal voting. We've got problems in St Albans, which we're hearing about, and voters in St Albans where they're trying all these things, internet and email and what have you, and e-counting. There seems to be a technical problem. They found that the electoral register, when you go in and put your finger on the internet and you're meant to bring up your name, there's meant to be a double-checking process, and the electoral register is meant to come up. Now, it hasn't come up. This has allowed the possibility of fraud, and they've decided there that they're going to have to, it was meant to be the first count to finish, or one of the first counts to finish, and they're having to check a lot of these votes again manually. It looks like we may not get a result there till the morning. Now, there's also been a problem in Harlow in Essex, problems with thousands of postal votes there. Right. 3,000 of them or something, they weren't officially stamped. The problem with the paperwork there, but they're saying that they're going ahead and counting the votes anyway, and they're going to declare a result on that. Now, that leaves the possibility, and we don't know yet, that losing candidates may take legal action.
But they were saying earlier in the evening that they might make that illegal, that vote, weren't they?
We're absolutely not sure at the moment. They might go ahead with it, and they might wait to see whether there's any sort of challenge. But there is good news, and this reflects what happened last year as well. Postal voting's been excellent. In Guildford, all postal voting, 50%. 17% up on last year,
excellent.
Which is a real result.
We like to vote at home. Thanks very much for that, Tim. Well, we're back at 12:30 with the very latest results. We'll keep you up to date and hope you can join us then. Don't forget CFAX and our website. We hand you back now to David.
Well, welcome back, and the latest news we have from Birmingham is that the Labour Party has indeed lost control of Birmingham, 7 seats to the Liberal Democrats and 3 seats to the Conservatives. So Labour has lost control there. Now let's have a look at how the rest of the country has been going. First of all, a look at the councillors. We were talking about this as a good gauge of what's happened so far. Well, it's still very early, but Labour are down 88, Conservatives up 52, Liberal Democrats up 24. In terms of councils, Labour are down 5 in terms of their control, Conservatives up 6, no change in no overall control. And those are the two ways of looking at it. Peter Snow has other ways of looking at all these things, so let's hear from him now about how the Conservatives are faring. Peter.
And it's a fascinating story, David, and it's not too good for the Conservatives. I think the most impressive thing about this projected national share is how even the parties really look tonight. The Liberal Democrats doing better in local elections than we've seen them within recent memory. The Labour Party just above them on 31, and the Tories there with 34% in the lead. But look at that Tory lead another way. Look back over the last 10 years or so at the Tories down there at their nadir, down there. Locals, 1995, they scored 25% of the projected national share. Here they are now, oh my goodness, 34%. 9% better, you might say, than they were at their nadir down there. Look at it a different way, though. Look at it like this. What's happened in between 1995 and now? Answer, 38% they had under William Hague in 2000. At the general election, they had 33%. Last year, 34%. This year, 34%. They're not doing frightfully well. They're not moving very much. Look at the swingometer, just to give you some idea of where the swing has moved between the parties since the general election. Now, this is a local election, this is not a national vote, this is not a general election, but it does give you an indication of what the Tories need to do. Here are the positions. If there's no swing at all from the last election, there'll be a Labour majority of 167. These are all the Labour seats that need to turn blue if the Tories are to win. They need a huge swing of 10.5% to be within reach of winning a general election. Now, on the figures we have today, which are not general election figures at all, it's just an illustration, is to see how poorly the Tories are doing. Here we are in mid-term when they should be striking way out ahead of Labour with a 6% swing to the Tories, which would still see Labour with just a small majority. In fact, though, just to put the cold water over the Tory hopes completely, I'm afraid, when you look at the opinion polls, which give perhaps the best indication of where the Tories will be at a general election, the opinion polls suggest, the most recent opinion polls suggest there's actually a swing to Labour. Look now at a poll we've just done. ICM have done a poll for us, and we've asked people, how do you think the parties compare? How do you think the Tories would run the economy? 28% think they'd trust the Tories to run the economy, compared to the government, which has been in power now for 6 years, who get 47%. Here we are in the mid-term of this Labour government. They're still way ahead of the Conservatives on the economy. Have they got a good team of leaders? 11% said yes to that for the Tories, and a whole 45% said yes to Labour having a good team of leaders. What about running the NHS? Would the Tories run it well? 15% said yes. For Labour, the answer is still, again, 6 years into this government, it's having a lot of trouble with the public services, but they're still way ahead of the Tories on trust on the NHS. Are they in touch with ordinary people? 12% said yes, the Conservatives are in touch. What about this Labour government? 6 years in, 33% still think the Labour government's in touch with ordinary people. So, on the whole, it's a pretty grim picture, David, for the Tories.
Peter, thank you very much. I should just say, by the way, that at the bottom right side of the screen during this evening, we'll keep you up to date with the overall picture. There it is, showing how many councils have been won so far, how many councillors each party has secured. And by the way, if you're by any chance watching on satellite, you can always press the red button and you can choose to watch highlights of the council elections or the Scottish and Welsh elections, and then also be an update of the results so far available at all times there if you are fortunate enough to be watching on satellite and it isn't breaking up as my satellite does every time I watch by satellite. It keeps freezing in the middle of I don't know whether that's your experience. Anyway, mustn't speak against satellite, it's the way of the future. Rita Chakrabarti has been talking to Anne Widdecombe, and we must hear from Anne Widdecombe now about what Crispin Blunt said perhaps at St Maidstone.
David, Conservatives here in Maidstone, just as all over the country, are reeling from this shock news of Crispin Blunt's resignation. Well, I'm joined now by the Conservative MP for Maidstone and the Weald and the former frontbencher, Anne Widdecombe. Anne Widdecombe, this has been done for maximum impact by Crispin Blunt, hasn't it? The timing is devastating for you.
Oh, I mean, the fact is that even if we won thousands of seats tonight, never mind hundreds, all the coverage tomorrow would be about fresh divisions, fresh resignations. A man has a right to resign if he believes that it's necessary, but I can't see anything which justifies this timing.
But the substance of what he says is equally devastating, isn't it? He alleges that most of the front bench feel the way that he does, that Ian Duncan Smith doesn't have the profile, he's not making the necessary impact to do his job properly. They don't think he's up to it.
I don't see how anybody can make that judgment until we've actually assessed the results of this massive test of public opinion that is going on up and down the country today. This isn't 1,000 or 2,000 people being interviewed as a sample representative sample of the nation. This is actually a major test. And until we've seen the results of that, I do not know how Crispin can make that assessment.
Does this make a leadership challenge more likely?
Well, if we want to tear ourselves apart, if we actually want to make the country forget that Labour at the moment is seriously divided, that Robin Cook's resigned, and that half Tony Blair's party wouldn't go along with his war resolution, that the Chancellor is openly at war with the Health Secretary over the funding of the NHS, if we want to make the nation forget that, then by all means let's have another bloodbath and let's have it over several months for everybody's entertainment. What is the matter with the parliamentary party? Look down there. All those guys there, They've been knocking on doors, they've been delivering leaflets, they've been canvassing votes, they've worked their socks off for the party. They don't need this tonight. This could have waited, it didn't have to happen tonight.
But Crispin Blunt is merely saying something that many, many people within the party are saying, that Ian Duncan Smith has failed to make the impact, the party hasn't moved in the polls, and what's shocking about this is the timing and his position in the party.
But a big opinion poll is being taken in Britain tonight. It is called a set of local elections. And that is when we will be able to make a judgment as to how far we have or have not moved. I do not understand this timing.
How does this leave you feeling? How does this make the party look?
Well, we could certainly look better. And there's no point in pretending that this is not going to be destructive. However, I still think we can win the next election, but we'll only do it if we're prepared to start marching up the hill towards victory behind the leader, rather than sitting at base camp squabbling amongst ourselves. That is the choice that confronts us. I actually want to see us back in power. I think Labour's making a mess of it. I think we can do better. What chance have we of telling the country that when things like this happen?
OK, Anne Widdecombe, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. And now back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Rita. We have had a result from Bristol. Labour has lost control of Bristol. They're down 5 seats. The Liberal Democrats up 4. It's gone to no overall control. But let's have a look now at Birmingham. And this is the seat that Labour has had since '84. And Labour has lost control of Birmingham. They're down 11. Conservatives up 4. The Liberal Democrats up 8. And to get the full story, we go over and join John Sudworth in Birmingham now. John.
David, well, a pretty grim night for Labour here. They've lost control of Birmingham City Council for the first time in 20 years. But the Conservatives shouldn't be too pleased. They've only seen a weak swing to the Conservatives from Labour. It's the Liberal Democrats who seem to have really capitalised on Labour's misfortune. And the speculation here is that we really could be seeing a strong anti-war vote. The Liberal Democrats have really done well. Swings of up to 30% in some of the inner city wards with large Muslim populations. Let's speak now to Dr Mohammed Nassim from the Birmingham Central Mosque. Dr Nassim, do you believe that what we've seen tonight is a result of that anti-war vote, people switching their allegiance from Labour to the Liberal Democrats?
I don't think so. I think there is a great resentment against New Labour, and Liberal Democrats have gained from it because of that resentment against Mr Blair's policies. I do not count Conservatives because nobody takes Conservative Party as a reasonable alternative. So both parties, main parties, are going to suffer because of the policies on Iraq.
Obviously, for the Labour Party nationally, this is a very worrying phenomenon. Do you think it's going to continue? Will we see the effect of this repeated in national elections? Do you think people have lost faith in Labour to that extent in your community?
I'm sure that will be the result in the national election. I think if you look, I don't know what happened in the Scottish election. I'm sure the Muslim vote has gone against the Labour there as well.
Well, Sean Simon, you're a Labour MP from Birmingham. That's a pretty grim prediction there. Do you think this anti-war vote has had an effect tonight?
I think it would be foolish to try and pretend that there has not been a certain degree of Muslim abstention, perhaps because of the war. But there are 3 points I would make. Firstly, it's almost certainly the case, although we haven't seen all the numbers yet, that there will have been tens of thousands more Muslims in Birmingham who voted Labour tonight than voted for any other party. Let's remember that. Secondly, one of the reasons why you're quite wrong to say that this has huge national implications is that the inner city politics of a very multi-ethnic city like Birmingham is very, very complicated. It has all kinds of specific and particular restrictions that don't apply anywhere else in the country, many of which have been responsible for many of the gains we've seen tonight.
That's putting a bit of a gloss on it, though, isn't it? I mean, you've lost the biggest metropolitan council in England.
If I may make my third point, if it is the case that there has been what will certainly be proved to be temporary abstention because of the war, what that will mean is that having done a very difficult thing because we believed it to be the right thing, and actually having done it very successfully, if we have paid a price for doing the right thing for the right reasons, then so be it.
Whatever way you look at it, though, this is a pretty dreadful result for Labour tonight here in Birmingham.
I'm not going to say it's the best result we could possibly have had, but it is certainly a temporary protest, blip to the Liberals, and one which contains very many, very Birmingham-specific circumstances which cannot be extrapolated to the rest of the country.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining us this evening. Labour have lost a total of 11 seats, 11 out of the 26 they were defending here tonight. And as I've said, a pretty historic moment here in Birmingham. They've held this council since 1983. There'll be a lot of very disappointed Labour activists here tonight.
Thanks very much. Well, now, Tony King, what do you make of the results we've had in so far? I know we haven't had all that many. We've had only 82, but the big result from Birmingham.
Well, I think the most remarkable single thing that's happening is the progress of the Liberal Democrats. The projected national share of the vote for them now stands at 30%. That's only 1% behind the Tories. It's the best ever for the Liberal Democrats, and it's much better than the Liberal SDP alliance got in its heyday in the early 1980s. This is pretty spectacular stuff. And in addition, we've got used to the idea of the Liberal Democrats being a suburban and rural party. We've got used to the idea latterly of its being important in the old industrial north, in Liverpool, Manchester, both Newcastles. But what is quite new and what's emerging this evening is the Liberal Democrats are clearly establishing themselves in the big cities of the south of England, in Birmingham, in Bristol and elsewhere. This is a new development.
Okay, Theresa May, do you see the Liberal Democrats as a threat to you now in the way that Tony King's described?
Well, no, I don't, not from the results that we've seen coming through so far.
Well, you disagree with his interpretation?
Well, we have lost. Well, as I said earlier, I think there is a real question about how far you can project from these very local results, local election results, onto a national picture. What we are seeing is a degree of churn in the results. For example, yes, we have lost Torbay to the Liberals, but we've actually gained 2 councils from the Liberal Democrats. Yes, we've lost Carlisle, but we've gained Worcester, a very iconic council, if you remember, about Worcester Woman that the Labour Party made so much of in 1997. And gained councils like Mendip, where I have to say the BBC themselves said that they thought it highly unlikely that we would gain it, that it would go to a hung council.
Pippa Norris, people say that all parties take comfort from local election results. Do you agree they all can, or is Tony King onto something with these Liberal Democrats and the threat they pose?
The Liberal Democrats is remarkable, but the other factor which has been going on is the BNP, where we see that they now have made considerable gains. Remember, they had 5 previous councillors, and they've doubled that immediately before we've had other results coming in.
In Burnley, they're the second largest party now.
Yes. And the results have been mostly so far in the West Midlands. It strikes me the BNP has had 2 strategies. One has been on asylum, and that's been very much in the northeast when you look at Sunderland and Newcastle and Gateshead. And the other has been very much on the old classic issues of race and those sorts of problems. And it seems to be so far in the West Midlands where they seem to be gaining, but we'll have to see.
OK. John Reid, Birmingham, big blow.
Yeah, well, again, following on from Pippa, so far as Labour goes, I came in tonight and said right at the beginning it would be a tough night for us in some areas. None tougher, incidentally, in the West Midlands, because the councils there, like Birmingham, like Dudley and so on, were held tonight on a knife edge. And secondly, because there are particular factors. We heard just a few minutes ago from one of the representatives of the mosques there saying that there had been a differential holdback in the West Midlands. So as far as Labour's concerned, I don't actually think that the story is going to be that the government loses mid-term. I think tomorrow it's going to be why the Conservatives, as Anthony said, have done so badly. It is true, Theresa says, there is churning, but at the end of the churning there is some indication of measurement, and that is that they have done worse than William Hague did, in terms of seats. William Hague was something like 11% ahead of Labour in the equivalent results 2 or 3 years ago. That isn't the case. 3%, I think, separate us here. So by every standard, the Conservatives are doing badly.
But you're playing it both ways, because you agreed with Andy Marr earlier on and the other two when they said that local elections were local and not about national politics, and now you're talking about it as though it was an indication of where the Tory party stands.
No, what I was agreeing
Which one do you believe?
What I was agreeing with was Andy's contention that you cannot take these elections merely as a national opinion
But that's
poll.
what you're doing.
Well, I'm not, because I am allowing for local factors. Indeed, I gave you 2 of them in the West Midlands, which are more peculiar to the West Midlands than anywhere else. For instance, the narrowness of the lead of the council and the huge number of Muslims we have there compared to other areas.
But so it's a national trend modified by local circumstances?
Yes, it's a combination of both. I mean, nobody goes there without any psychological framework. But if I may just say on the Lib Dems, I think they are doing reasonably well in some areas, but they have trended to be transient. What they haven't done is win councils and then move on and extend their lead in councils. And what will be important tonight is to look at the councils they won the last time, and that is Oldham, Liverpool and Sheffield. Let's see how they do there. And perhaps on a unanimous...
We lost Sheffield last year.
On a unanimous note, so I beg your pardon, yeah. On a unanimous note, I think that while the BNP have made some inroads in some places, let's remember they had 25 candidates in Sunderland. They did not win one seat. So, I mean, from me, certainly, well done. Congratulations to the people of Sunderland who've seen behind the veneer of a very nasty, racist party.
Simon Hughes, can this result, if Tony King is right and it's good all the night through for the Liberal Democrats, be converted into anything in general elections? Because the figures show every time you have a surge locally, it doesn't actually repeat itself in Westminster.
If we're above last year, which was we got between 27 and 28%, if we're above that, that is above what we expected. My honest view was that we'd be pushing up towards that, but didn't expect to go up. The three tests tonight for everybody: share of the vote across the country, numbers of councillors, and numbers of councils. Those are the real three tests. My judgment is share of the vote looks good. We are beginning to go up in numbers of councils. I've just heard we've picked up Watford. I think we're going to pick up Chesterfield. I gather Durham may come to us. I mean, this is territory we have not been in before. And to pick up John's point, so there's the area of agreement. The area of agreement, I hope, is that we mustn't be distracted by what may be a BNP performance here or there. They've only fought 2% of the seats. They're not big players. They've targeted their efforts. The big issues, and they've never been good, they've never done anything when they're elected. We have to concentrate on running these places. And for us, I've looked down the list. In the north, we've made progress in Durham, Wear Valley, Newcastle, Manchester. In the Midlands, it looks as if Chesterfield, and it looks as if the Midland cities and Birmingham. And in the south, Portsmouth, Plymouth, Bristol, Bournemouth, and holding the other two. So it's not localised.
Just before we leave the subject, we'll come back to the British National Party. The British National Party claim to be repositioning themselves, to be looking after the poorest section of the community, whether they're Muslim or black, to have supporters among black and Muslims. We saw a story about that. Do you agree with any of that, or do you think they're still basically a racist and anti-immigrant party?
They're absolutely basically that. But if you look at their record, when the council tax is set in councils, this year they often haven't been there. So the one time, which affects what people pay, where we'd all agree that's one of the big issues, they don't turn up, they don't show an interest, so that they actually don't go in for the good of anybody in the whole community.
All right, hold on a second. All right, yeah. When they make these claims about being left-wing, looking after the poor and so on, about being pseudo-socialist, the National Socialist Party of Germany was the Nazi party. It called itself National Socialist. It played to those, so they have a sophisticated veneer. They are far more sophisticated than they were previously. But the point that Simon made is right. Don't let's exaggerate their influence. There are something like 1,500 independent councillors. They have a tiny percentage of them, and the danger from them comes not in their numbers, but in the poisonous nature of their policies.
All right. Andy Marr, you've been sitting chewing the cud silently there.
Chewing a sandwich silently earlier
chewing
on.
a sandwich, or eating crisps, you seem to have been doing, rather disgusting. But anyway, what do you make of it so far?
Well, I think in the world of politics can accommodate, as we know, only one main story at any one time. And I think one of the things going on tonight is the question of what is that story? Is the story that Labour, after the war and after its divisions, are in real trouble and falling back? Or is the story that Ian Duncan Smith is in trouble? Crispin Blunt doing his best to push that ahead. Now, judging by what we've been seeing, it's a little bit more the latter than the former, I think, probably tomorrow. Everyone's going to be looking at tomorrow morning's front pages and how this story plays out tomorrow. It should be said that one of the crucial things that will happen tomorrow is we will see whether or not other people bounce up and say, well, we're against IDS as well. Crispin Blunt is actually going to be facing his reselection, meeting at his Reigate constituency. Now, Reigate is not an alfalfa bean munching, open-toed sandal wearing bunch of wishy-washy liberals. They are true blue Tories down in Reigate.
They've just held the council, I see, as well.
And if he's got their support, if the anti-IDS movement is getting support in the grassroots in true blue parts of the country, then that's quite serious for him. So I think that's the story that a lot of people are going to be watching tomorrow.
Okay, Dinner King, briefly.
Can I just add to that that I can't see into the minds of Conservative members of Parliament, but if the Tories at the end of the night have only got a national projected share of the vote of 31%, that means not only have they not made substantial progress in the last few years, but as has been said frequently in the studio, they have actually fallen back. And if the aim of the exercise is to position the Conservative Party as the principal opposition party ought to be positioned to stand a chance of winning the next election, these findings, despite the churning that Theresa quite rightly talks about, do not suggest that the Conservatives are making substantial progress or indeed any progress at all.
All right. One word, Theresa, because I want to go to Mark Mardell.
Simon himself said that there's share of the vote, there's also seats gained and councils gained. And there is absolutely no doubt that we are making gains in seats and we are making gains in councils. And some of the gains we're making in councils, like East Staffordshire, are ones that, frankly, most people didn't expect us to gain. So we are making those gains. We're seeing that come through. And that's, if you look at the percentage share of the vote we got last year on in the council elections, if that had been translated to this year, we would actually be losing seats overall. So we have indeed made progress. And particularly, as I say, we are taking councils.
All right, well, we'll see how that goes on a bit later on. Mark Mardell is now in Burnley and joins us again. Mark.
Yes, the BNP have now left this hall after the last result has been declared, shouting in jubilation. So the only people left are really Labour Party members wearing very long, grim faces, because what happened tonight was that BNP took 7 seats. They've already got 1 on the council. That means they had 3, but there was 1 left. So it means they've got 8 seats on Burnley Council. That makes them the second largest party. What's really quite strange about that is that all the opposition parties, all the other parties in opposition to the BNP, say that they were peculiarly ineffective as councillors. One of them went because there was too much pressure of work. None of them turned up to the special meeting that sets the budget, the most important council meeting. They say there were shenanigans there and the meeting was moved, so they missed it. But certainly reading their election address in the local paper, it was almost apologetic, saying, well, our election hasn't damaged Burnley in the way that some people suggested. So I think that it's very much a protest vote, and one of the things that occurs to me is I wonder that as the establishment parties and as the establishment says, handle these people with care, they are really dreadful, they're really awful, I wonder whether the sort of voters that I've been talking to a bit today who've been attracted by them may say, yes, these are the sort of people we want. We want people who aren't part of the establishment. I think there is a sort of a danger, self-fulfilling prophecy almost, that the more the establishment rejects them and paints them as outsiders, the more that the people who are angry with the other parties, don't think they get results, will perhaps turn to them. I mean, it certainly seems that that's what's happened here in Burnley, that it's not necessarily the appeal of their policies on race or asylum, although I'm sure that the people who voted for them do agree with them on that, but the fact that they made a big play of the inefficiency of the council and that people just not getting their due from the council.
Much indeed. We'll be hearing more from you perhaps a bit later on. But now we're joined by Trevor Phillips, the new head of the Commission for Racial Equality from Manchester. Mr. Phillips, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Now, what do you make of these?
David.
What do you make of this increase in the BNP strength, particularly in Burnley? 6 seats, second largest party in Burnley.
Well, it's a matter of great disappointment to anybody who's a Democrat and who believes in equality that the BNP should win 1 single seat anywhere. I think the fact is that what one's most concerned about is not just that they win seats, but that they shouldn't have the kind of success that forces other parties, as they would see it, to move in their direction. And I think the results in Sunderland and I gather in Oldham, where basically they've been a damp squib, where they've been rejected, are both a matter of congratulations for the people of Sunderland and Oldham.
Well, you know this well.
But it's also good news.
Yeah, but you know these areas well. What is it that's happened in Burnley? 7 altogether now, because they held 1 from before.
Well, it is a surprise because they've proved themselves idle and opportunistic and racist in Burnley. But I think there are probably 3 factors. First of all, a continuing disillusionment by the people of Burnley about the effectiveness of their local council. Secondly, this is not a party political point, it's simply a fact, the collapse of the Conservative vote in that area. And thirdly, in the background has been the hysterical and vitriolic campaign carried out by some of the media on the issue of asylum seekers.
How much do you attribute it to a neglect of pockets of poverty in Burnley by the council?
Well, I think that that may be part of it, but that would not be exclusive to Burnley. There are other parts of the country where that is probably true, where people haven't voted for the BNP. I think that this is much more to do with, in that particular town, the collapse of the textile industry and the feeling that actually there is nothing yet there to supply the people of Burnley with economic prosperity or with any hope, and that therefore to some extent people are turning in on themselves. I think there are particular conditions there which have led to this, but at the heart of it, I suspect, is a very widespread disillusionment amongst the people of Burnley with the idea that conventional politics can actually provide them with any answers, and that is a huge disappointment. But I say, set against what's happened elsewhere.
To what extent has the handling of asylum seekers and immigration as a whole had?
Well, I think that it's not so much the handling of asylum seekers and immigration, because in truth, you know, the asylum seekers and immigrants actually, in general terms in these towns, are really very small numbers. However, I think the way that their presence has been reported, some of the stories, the absolutely absurd stories about how asylum seekers are taking over the best houses and all of that, have led people to believe that not only have they been left and abandoned by the conventional political spectrum, but actually these other people are coming along getting some very special treatment. So in that respect, though, you know, you have to say that the media are free to report what they like. I think some irresponsible reporting, peddling nonsensical stories that somebody drops in a pub, have actually had a major impact on people's views about this kind of political process, and has resulted to some extent in the vote tonight. And I think those papers which have been peddling this hysterical campaign against asylum seekers should really tomorrow morning be looking into their hearts and thinking, what have we done?
Well, you're saying the Daily Mail is tacitly supporting or allowing the BNP to come through, is that what you're saying?
I think that some newspapers, of which the Mail is one, the Sun has been another, and some, particularly some local newspapers, do bear some responsibility by the way they've reported asylum seekers. I mean, they talk about vast numbers of asylum seekers when in fact, you know, we admit about 10,000 refugees a year. That number I've seen in several newspapers reported as 100,000. Now, what are ordinary people to think when they read that kind of thing in the newspapers? Of course it's frightening, of course it's anxiety making. So those people who are reporting things in this way really, you know, tonight isn't supposed to be a night of democracy. Now, democracy for the citizen does depend on actually having some real idea of what the truth is, what the real situation is. If they are told things which are untrue, which are massively exaggerated, then they will vote in ways which really don't accord with their instincts. I would not, by the way, suppose that most people in Burnley are in any way racist. They would be horrified to think that they are voting for a party which is in reality racist, but I think they think that the situation that faces them as a town is something different to what it really is.
Okay, Trevor Phillips, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's have a look at just coming up to 12:15 at the results so far. Councillors, first of all. This is how it stands at the moment, with 106 out of 340 councils. We won't get all of those tonight because we don't get the Scottish councils tonight. But the change in the numbers of councillors so far, 156 down for Labour, 109 up for the Conservatives, just 33 up for the Liberal Democrats. And in terms of councils, Labour have lost control of 8, the Conservatives have gained control of 8, and otherwise there's no change. Labour losing control, Birmingham, Trafford, Rochdale, Bolton, Bristol, Exeter, those first 4, the metropolitan councils, Bristol, Exeter. Conservatives gaining in East Staffordshire, Hyndburn, Basildon, Worcester, Congleton, Stratford-on-Avon. Liberal Democrats gaining control of Torbay and Watford. Well, now, the turnout over the last 20 years or so at local elections has fallen. It used to be around the 40% mark or so. Tonight we're expecting it to be about 30%. People often say it matches the decline in the powers of local government. If they aren't doing anything, why bother voting for them? This year there's been disagreement over, for instance, who controls education, where the new money put in by the Treasury has actually gone, whether local education authorities are responsible for it not getting to the schools or somebody else. And the Prime Minister accepted on Monday at his press conference that some schools actually weren't getting the funds they should, and that had to be put right. So, what powers do councils actually have? What real power?
Politicians have been struggling to drum up support for these local elections. But one thing guaranteed to get a reaction is mention of the council tax. Most of us are paying more than we've ever paid before. But what exactly are we getting for our money?
Well, I've got my libraries. I use the libraries a lot. I've got police, hopefully.
Well, all we get at the moment is just the rubbish. That's all I can see anyway.
The fire brigade, if I need it. The pavements have no complaints.
They're always taking up roads, repaving roads, and that's usually the town centre. That's been done about 3 times in the past 2 years.
Our bin's probably the only thing they do for us on a regular thing. That's cancelling it, you're emptying your bins, but apart from that, not a lot.
Council tax does pay for rubbish collection, but it also helps fund schools, parks and recreation, roads, housing and services like fire and police. And have you noticed whether your council tax has gone up or down?
Oh, it's definitely gone up.
And what do you...
Sky high.
And do you think you're getting anything for that money?
Not at all, no. I think the town's a dump. I think the council run it really, really poorly, really slackly. I think all they do is look out for themselves.
There's always a rise every year, but no one seems to know where the money exactly goes.
And when the council tax goes up every year, who do you blame for it going up?
Well, I suppose the councillors themselves. I think they're junketing on our council tax.
Central government rather than sort of anybody else.
Where do you think it's all going?
Somebody's having a nice holiday somewhere, aren't they? Tony Blair.
Whoever's to blame, they're right about one thing. Council tax in Oldham has gone up by more than 12% this year, just below the average increase across England of 13%. Someone in a Band D property in Oldham now pays over £1,200. The government has increased the amount it gives to councils, including Oldham, by an average of 8%.
OK, carrying on with the theme of algebra today.
But the extra money hasn't stopped complaints that services are underfunded. Grange School, like many others, is getting almost 4% more this year. But all that and more has been eaten up by the rising cost of running the school. Teachers who leave can't be replaced, and vital repairs are on hold.
I presume it's all about creating the kind of environment that you want children to be comfortable in and enjoy being in.
If you create an environment for the children in which they want to work and make progress, then it's far easier for them. But this kind of thing is occurring all around the school.
And when do you think you might be able to get something done about that?
I'm £170,000 short at this point in time to run the school in the way I want to run it, so things like this will just have to go on a back burner.
I'd like to see more money actually go into education and things like that, but to the people that need it rather than the people that sit in offices and basically don't seem to do a lot.
There is a shortage of materials, books, everything.
I don't think any of the schools get enough, full stop.
The government give with one hand and take it away with the other because of increase in national insurance and contributions and all that side of things.
Well, I don't know. I think some schools are getting some money because, as a case in point, my children have got a brand new school this year. So, obviously, that's cost a lot of money.
Schools received an extra £2.7 billion from the government this year, but increases in national insurance, pension contributions and pay have left just £250 million. Some schools say money's not being passed on to them by local education authorities. The funding crisis in schools has highlighted just how difficult it is to work out where taxpayers' money is going. But sometimes the confusion can suit the politicians. Central government and local authorities can pin the blame on each other when things go wrong. In the meantime, it's voters who are left in the dark about where their money goes. Hardly an incentive to rush to the polling station.
Well, that was Vicky Young, and now let's hear from Robert Nisbet in Sheffield what younger voters think about all that.
Well, absolutely. A lot of talk there from homeowners, etc. But what about the under-25s? What do they think? Do these council elections matter in the slightest? Do they matter in the slightest, these elections?
Councils do matter, but at the end of the day, I've been disappointed with Labour, yeah? And I'm not going to vote for Labour. I'm not going to vote for Tony Blair. I'm not voting for the Conservatives at all.
Why?
The policy on Iraq has been wrong throughout, yeah? I'm passionate about this. They wasted hundreds of millions of pounds, yeah, in that war when they could have improved our health services, they could have improved our education services. And the only person that Tony Blair's impressed is George Bush, and that's what I'm saying.
So
I think most of the people here agree with me as well.
Okay, well, let's find out. Let's move through here. Let's ask you, sir. Is this a protest vote about Iraq? Do councils matter to you?
Personally, not really. I don't think people my age are really concerned about local councils. I don't think they feel they have enough power. But I think a lot of people are actually coming out for this election to vote purely against the war in Iraq. I mean, a lot of people I know are voting just to show their disgust at the government. But generally, I don't think local councils matter too much. I mean, they haven't got enough power to matter, so...
Did you vote today?
I did, yeah, with a text message, which I thought was quite good. But
do you think that's the way forward? I mean, there's a pilot scheme here that's been running in Sheffield, e-voting, where you get your smart cards and you can text vote or you can do it on the internet. Has that made it, I don't know, more easier for you to get involved?
Yeah, definitely, it's more accessible. I mean, everybody I know's got a mobile phone. I mean, it's just simple. It's in your pocket. I mean, going to a polling station isn't always necessarily the easiest thing to do. So yeah, I think it's more accessible. Definitely.
Okay, well, let's move down the line. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go and just move you over here. Why don't we do that? Let's talk to you three ladies, if that's all right. Anna, first off,
yes.
You're a politics student here, aren't you?
No, I'm a history student.
You're a history student, okay.
Yes.
So today we're talking about council elections. Does it matter to you?
It does, yes. I think actually council elections don't matter as much to a student because they're not in the area, it's not so permanent. So we don't see the kind of results as much. We're not paying council tax, so that kind of thing doesn't matter. But I voted strategically as a form of protest against the Labour policy on the war. And that really does matter to me.
And we're hearing a lot about protests. Did all of you, I mean, a show of hands, how many people took part in demonstrations against Iraq, the war in Iraq? So quite a few. How many of you voted? Okay, so roughly the same number. Let's talk to you, Kate. You're a politics student, aren't you? Is it the same? I'm sensing kind of apathy but anger, which is a bit of a contradiction in terms.
A bit of a paradox, isn't it, really? But I think that people don't really... I think people feel quite alienated by this political system. People don't really see that they can change things that much. You know, so yeah, there is a lot of cynicism, definitely, and that translates into apathy.
I think it's much more about cynicism than it is about apathy. I mean, we've got three main parties, but where's the difference?
I think a lot of people feel that they kind of waste their vote as well. Like if you have a constituency where you have any kind of majority, like a safe seat, what's the point in a way in even voting? Because your vote isn't going to get cast, and that's the system.
Is the way forward then? Your protest to the street. We saw the May Day protest
today.
Definitely. But is that the only way that you think your voice is going to be heard?
Yeah, I mean,
except that it wasn't.
But even that's not listened to. That's the thing. Even though the protests were massive, they weren't listened to at all. So it probably isn't the way forward.
It breeds more cynicism, I think, and therefore apathy. So if people don't feel that they can change things, then.
Samira, at the end, how do you feel about this?
I totally agree with what they say. I mean, that's the only way that our voice will be heard, yet nothing comes about it. I mean, voting for... I mean, all the people that I've spoken to today have sort of like been anti-war or just have lost faith in politics now because the voices go unheard. And I think that's something that the government needs to address because we are tomorrow's future, in a sense. And, you know, like I said, you know, we've lost faith and the motive's still not accomplished of the war.
Well, I mean, a fairly depressing message to the politicians back in the studio. They're just not listening here. They don't have much faith in you. David.
Thanks very much. Well, let's put it to our new batch of politicians. Tessa Giles, Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. Michael Howard, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. Tom McNally, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrats in the House of Lords. Tessa Giles, you heard what they're saying. You've heard the views from many young people there about the war. Do you think Labour's being damaged by that? And indeed, to use the immortal words of Willie Whitelaw, stirring up apathy among young people because of the way you're conducting your politics at Westminster?
Well, I think that certainly, I mean, young people have been sort of disproportionately opposed to the war and action in Iraq, and I think that you just have to look at the the age of the majority of people who went on protest marches, talk to our children's friends, talk to our children, and realise that I mean the war, or more particularly anti-war feeling, has very much politicised young people. And I think we have to see over time what happens to that rebellion and what happens to that opposition. You know, to what extent this has been a politicisation and engagement by young people who felt that at last there's a cause that they can really attach themselves to and feel passionate about. But also
damaging in these elections. I mean, you've lost, for instance, you've lost control of Coventry, we hear.
Yes, I know, and I think that, I mean, in relation to the campaign overall, the effect has been differential. In Birmingham, I heard Albert Bohr interviewed earlier, and the former leader of Birmingham, may still be the leader of Birmingham, making the point that, you know, Iraq was hardly mentioned on the doorstep.
Okay.
I think the real impact has been on numbers of Labour activists staying at home. But of course, going back to the young people, you know, we have to see in 6 or 9 months' time, you know, as democracy begins to be established in Iraq, whether those young people's minds are changed.
All right. Michael Howard, Conservatives, bad night for you?
Oh, very good night.
Oh, really?
Good heavens, we've won.
Challenge for the leadership?
We've just won Worcester, which we haven't won since 1979, for heaven's sake. We've won.
That's it, is it? I mean,
no, it's certainly not. As you've seen, we've won very many other councils. We're winning councils. We are actually, I suppose people would be astonished to discover this from the general tone of the conversation, but we are actually now the biggest party in local government in England, both in terms of the number of councillors and in terms of the number of councils held. So I think it's a good night. I also think, and I say this at this early stage in the night, indeed I've said it on another channel an hour ago when we didn't know what the results were going to be, that I think that the national implications of today's vote are minimal. I think that people are voting for councils, they're voting to some extent on issues of the day like the war, which I think is playing a part, and I think that the general election will be fought in an entirely different political landscape on entirely different issues. Okay. I think the lessons of today for the general election are almost entirely non-existent.
Tom McNally, Tony King, before you just arrived here, was saying that this was an amazing night for Liberal Democrats, never done so well in the popular vote and all that, and yet you've only got, at the moment, 38 gains in seats. Why is this? What's going on?
I think what we're seeing is a consolidation by the Liberal Democrats. I mean, we're about a third of the way to what The Guardian sets as a target of respectability. But I do think that Tony King is right and Andrew Marr is wrong, where I heard the exchange before, to ignore the popular vote here. This will be the best performance by a third party in any major election in modern times. Okay. And I'm very happy for, I often used to watch these programs and see defeated parties plaiting sawdust. I mean, this is a bad night for the Conservatives. And when the number crunchers get at these results, I suspect that the government will be reasonably content.
And in Sheffield, Sheffield, where we were hearing from all those young people, Labour have gained 6 seats and you've lost 5. So it's not a one-way street.
Sheffield is the odd man out in the big cities. Definitely okay. The odd man.
Okay. We'll go. All right. Well, we'll go to an odd man out for the Tories, which is Torbay, which the Liberal Democrats took control of from the Conservatives and joined Nick Thatcher. Nick.
Yes, David, the big news from the English Riviera tonight is that the Conservatives, who controlled this council for 3 years with a majority of 24, have lost it in quite spectacular style. The Liberal Democrats have gained it to add to the parliamentary seat that they have here. Labour didn't really have much of a look in. They only fielded 7 candidates after all, and it was a contest very much fought on local rather than national issues. If there is a lesson to come out of tonight, perhaps it's one that Ian Duncan Smith recognises already. He said when he became party leader that he wanted the party to face up to the challenge from the Liberal Democrats in parts of the southwest and indeed in the south. Tonight is a reminder of the scale of that task in trying to regain their popular support in areas where they were once historically strong, like Torbay. As a footnote for you, 4 BNP candidates in Torbay, the first time that they've stood in this part of the world. Well, we've had the results for 3 out of those 4, and they've trailed in last place. So despite their efforts to try and raise the profile of the BNP in the southwest, it clearly hasn't worked.
Pippa, your view of how things stand at the moment, and then we'll have a look at these full results.
Well, one of the things is clearly turnout, which has gone down about 6%, as I see, in Wales. It's gone down about 8% in Scotland or more. And yet in England it seems to have been fairly stable. And
so Scotland and Wales have had their own assembly and their own parliament. They're not even going out to vote.
I know. It does look as though there's some dissatisfaction, particularly with the powers of the Parliament. When you look at the survey data, that seems to be the case. They still support devolution, but they really feel that the Parliament and the Assembly hasn't got enough power to do the sort of things that they want for Wales and Scotland. But on the other hand, there is some good news on turnout as well, which is that where there are all postal ballots, that's gone up about 10%. So the government initiative, the Electoral Commission, which has been trying new ways of getting people to poll, it does seem very simple devices might have a big effect.
Okay, Andy Marr, on turnout.
Yes, I'm just interested in this because last time we had local election, we sat around the table. What I recall is that all the electronic systems of voting didn't really work, and that it was simple postal voting which boosted turnout. And that seems to be, from what we can gather, the message here again. But again, you know, the turnout is very, very low. I think all the parties will be deeply disappointed by Scotland and deeply disappointed by Wales. You know, there have been very, very vigorous, hard-fought campaigns up there between the parties, and the voters are not interested, or not interested.
So will
in
some
the
people be saying
expect.
devolution was an expensive mistake?
A lot of people are saying that, as we know already. I think it's a combination of things, but a lot of it is a sense, particularly in Scotland, I think, that the Parliament hasn't achieved enough. There's been people in it for themselves, that it's not been the great kind of democratic breakthrough that people were hoping for. It has to be a failure by the political class in the end.
Okay, let's just have a look at how things stand. It's now just midnight before we go to the regional results, and the councillors 177 down. Conservatives up 123, Labour down 177, Conservatives up 123, Liberal Democrats up 38. And on councils, this is how it stands at the moment. Conservatives up 8, Labour are down 9, Liberal Democrats have had no change on 7. Well, in a moment we'll be looking at how devolution, which we were just talking about, has been working out in these first 4 years. We'll be talking to people about what effects it's had on the lives of those living in Scotland and in Wales.
I think it's there, and you've got to make the most of what's there. I think, you know, a lot of people didn't want it, but it's there, it's in place, and people should be supporting it and making it work properly.
Well, just before that, the latest results now from your own region.
Welcome to BBC London's election coverage. Well, so far the Conservatives seem to have made some modest gains. They've taken Basildon in Essex, although they have missed another couple of targets. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats have taken control of Watford. In Broxbourne in Hertfordshire, the BNP has picked up a seat. Of course, there are no elections in London this year, but of our councils, Conservatives control 15. 12 are under no overall control. Labour run 2, Liberal Democrats 2, and residents' associations another 2. Well, one of the key battlegrounds of the night has to be Guildford. We understand that it's looking good for the Tories in Guildford. Straight now to Carl Mercer. We hear it could be getting close there, Carl.
More than close, Gillian. It looks like the Conservatives are actually going to be in control of Guildford Council this time tomorrow. This will be the first time they've run this council since 1987. It's been in no overall control, and Guildford was seen as one of the key targets for the Liberal Democrats. They wanted to see it as their gateway to Surrey, really, build on the advances they made in the parliamentary elections 2 years ago when Sue Doughty took the seat from the Tories, and the Lib Dems were focusing very hard here and in neighbouring constituencies, trying to push out of their southwest London commuter belt and try and push out into Surrey, pick up more votes there. But it looks like the Tories have come back here, and that's come on the back of a huge surge in voting. Guildford, one of the areas that has been piloting these new postal voting, all postal votes. None of these votes being counted behind me were actually cast today. They're all sent in by mail. 54% the average turnout, and in some wards up near 70%. That's near enough general election standard of turnout, which is extremely high. Normally that doesn't play well for the Tories, but it seems to have worked down here in Guildford.
Well, Carl, so a major setback then for the Lib Dems?
Yeah, it certainly is, and particularly given the comments of Crispin Blunt, the Reigate MP, just neighbouring to Guildford. You know, he said tonight IDS is not the man to lead the Conservative Party, something that went down very badly with the Conservatives here, who were saying, for goodness sake, we can build on local election results here and we can build a firm platform so we can attack the Lib Dems in this area at the next parliamentary elections.
Carl, thanks very much for that update. Well, our political editor, Tim Donovan, joins us now. We heard that turning out to be a good night for the Tories.
That does look good. Sue Doughty, Liberal Democrat MP, elected last time in that area. And certainly the impression one had was that Liberal Democrats hope to do very well there. So that if that transpires, if that works out that way, that is a good result. The other good one so far in our area is Basildon. Always been an interesting council, always been an interesting sort of area on the sort of national political map for the Conservatives. They've taken that back. They last had that in 1992. They needed one seat. They've got that. They've held seats like Hertsmere, which Labour had temporarily in the late 90s. They took that back the last time round, and they've held on to that. We've heard there that they could win Guildford. Reigate in Banstead, quite interestingly, they've held that very comfortably, but they'll be talking about something else there, which is their local MP, Christian Blunt. What was interesting there, the UK Independent Party was trying to make some headway there. They put up 4 or 5 candidates. One of the things they were up against was the decision or a plan to bring a French market to the town. That clearly hasn't played with any of the voters. The Conservatives solid there, solid in places like Tandridge. Now, Woking was one of their key areas, though. We say it was a mixed picture. This is why. Woking is somewhere where they needed 2 seats, very near to Guildford. You'd think if there was going to be some sort of uniform picture in the Surrey area, that would have happened. It didn't. We spoke and got a reaction from the Conservative leader.
In certain respects, it's mixed. I mean, partly disappointment because we didn't get the control we were hoping for. On the other hand, delighted the fact that our votes has continued to rise. The good work we've been putting on the ground has continued to show through, and we are getting closer all the time.
Now, we don't really know about the significance of it, but what about this BNP seat?
BNP standing, they were putting 3 candidates up in Broxbourne. This is absolutely true blue territory. A majority of 32 the Conservatives had there. There hasn't been anything else than Conservative for years. The BNP have got 1 candidate, they've 1 successful councillor there. That's significant in that we haven't had a councillor, a BNP councillor in this area, London or just outside it, for more than 10 years. Derek Beacon in Tower Hamlets, he won a by-election there. Stood for 1 term there. Quite significant in that they were standing maybe 8, 9 candidates in this area, didn't think they had any real hope. They described it as dipping their toe in the water to see what reaction they'd get. OK,
Tim, thanks for that for the moment. Let's go now to our reporter, Nicola Pearson in Chelmsford.
Well, here in Chelmsford, the count is well underway. There are 57 seats up for grabs here tonight. Now, currently, the Liberal Democrats are running the council with 3 independent candidates. There is no overall control here, but that's what the Liberal Democrats are hoping. They want to be running the council on their own. However, they're facing stiff opposition from the Conservatives, who also want to have overall control. So we're going to have to wait and see, really, what happens here. It could be a very close call. Now, the turnout, 1999, 32% of people eligible to vote turned out, and the council have hoped that many more people will have voted tonight.
Well, let's get more on this fight between the Tories and the Lib Dems. We're off to Windsor and Maidenhead now. Mike Ramsden's there for us. Mike, you're in a bar. Any parties going on there now?
Not very many parties yet. No, not very much happening here at all, to be honest with you. A few party activists left here at Morrison's Bar. We're just a couple of minutes away from the count at the Leisure Centre here in Maidenhead, and still no results. Apparently the problem is postal votes, matching those up with ballot papers. That's taking some time to do. So what's up for grabs here? Well, the Conservatives need 1 extra seat to take overall control of the council. Obviously they're pretty confident they can do that. But the Lib Dems have been campaigning hard as well. Boundary changes here in this area, in the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And they're hoping that they can capitalise on that. Apparently their leader Jeremy Hyde said they've put councillors or council representatives into areas where they were hoping to try and make some gains. They need an extra 9 seats to take overall control here. But as I said, no results yet. I'm going back to the count right now to see if we can find out some more. But it looks like it's going to be a late one here.
Thanks very much. Try and stay with it, Mike. Thank you. Well, let's talk to Tim again. Big debate has to be about turnout. We'll come to that in a minute. But what's the bigger picture with the Lib Dems?
Good result for them is that they've taken Watford from a previously hung council. They had got a directly elected mayor there, Liberal Democrat, and that's sort of clearly helped the Liberal Democrat momentum there. 3 Rivers, also in Hertfordshire, we've just heard they have held. So not a bad performance for them so far. But those are the key seats: Guildford, Windsor and Maidenhead.
OK, what about the issue of how people vote? That's been a story tonight, hasn't it?
Yeah, we heard from Carl a little bit earlier about the postal votes. They made a fundamental little change in some of these pilots this time, was that the postal vote, they insisted last time in many of the seats that people had to have a second signature to confirm your identity. Now, they've taken that away in Guildford, and clearly that's had an impact as well. It is quite considerable, 70% in one ward. That's the good news.
Good news,
but
there is some bad news.
There are some problems. There's some problems in Albans who are trialling everything. E-voting, e-counting, everything you can think of. And they've had problems there. They've had problems with because an electoral register which confirms people's identity hasn't come up. They're looking like that was meant to be one of the earliest, finishing results. It should be in the technology, etc. Looks like that might not happen until the morning. And there's also a problem in Harlow where thousands of postal votes there may not be included, cannot be included in fact, because the official stamp was missing. So it's sort of
good news and bad news.
Good news and
Thanks very much for that, Tim. Well, Tim and Nina will be here in the morning. Join them in breakfast. That starts at 6:25. Good night.
Well, welcome back. News that the Liberal Democrats have gained Durham from Labour. And we've now got some other results which you might like to see. Burnley, for instance, which we were talking about. This is a district council, only 1/3 of the seats being elected for reasons I won't go into because it's too complicated. There were 3 BNP councillors elected last year. 2 of them had to go for re-election again this year. Anyway, this is the picture now in Burnley. 24 Labour, 8 BNP, the second largest party in Burnley. The Liberal Democrats on 7. Bristol. Gone to no overall control from Labour. This is a big unitary authority. It has all sorts of powers and responsibilities. 1/3 of the seats up for election. Labour down 5. Liberal Democrats and Conservatives up those 5, 4 and 1 each. Sheffield. And Labour take control of the Metropolitan District of Sheffield. Again, only 1/3 of the seats elected this time, but the result is Labour up 6 and the Liberal Democrats down 5. Which Lord McNally was talking about just a moment ago. Basildon, Conservatives, and this is the one they very much hoped to take and did take, from no overall control. The Conservatives up 2 and Labour down 2. Well, now those are a few of the individual results. Let's have a look at the overall picture now of the night so far at 20 to 1 in the morning and join Peter Snow. Peter.
Well, David, what I want to do is give you a picture of Scotland, which is producing some rather interesting results. It's interesting things happening in Scotland. Admittedly, only 2 results on our scoreboard yet, taken by Labour. Little red slash in the middle of the map, I hope you can see it. Glasgow, Rutherglen and Hamilton South have gone to Labour. But within that Labour result, they were bound to win those 2 seats. Within those Labour results, SNP down, the Scottish National Party down, Labour vote down, hugely up. The Scottish Socialist Party of Tommy Sheridan is really doing quite well. Now, let me just show you now, we haven't got a forecast yet, but down below Edinburgh Castle, the new Scottish Parliament building, waited, not quite finished yet, but it will be waiting soon to receive the members of the Scottish Parliament elected today. Just to give you an indication from the latest opinion poll, no forecast yet on the basis of the results, just what the shape of this Parliament may be like. Here it is, all sycamore and oak, the interior. It's going to be frightfully exciting when it's finished. Costs an awful lot of money. And here's the Labour Party. Now, this is a forecast based on the opinion poll in the Herald. We have Jack McConnell's Labour Party with 52 down 4. Again, something like 52 down the Labour Party. Again, rather reflecting what's happened in those 2 results we've had in so far. There's Jim Wallace coming out to lead his Liberal Democrat team, 19 up 2, much the same as it was before. Let's put him back in his seat and have David McCletch's Conservatives out here. Now, the picture for them is, according to the opinion poll, that they'll be down about 8 seats. Well, we don't know. There's no sign of that in the results so far. The SNP down just 1 seat in the opinion poll. There's John Swinney with his team behind him. Let's put him back in his seat and look now at the interesting newcomer. Now, this is Tommy Sheridan. He was there in the last Parliament, but on his own with his Scottish Socialist Party. The poll suggests he might be up by 8, and that may well indeed be true according to these 2 results we've had so far. He's in that characteristic position, by the way, with his fist up. That's the way he swears the oath of the Scottish Parliament. So there we are. There's Tommy Sheridan. Now, here we have 5 others. It may well be we'll see some Greens coming in. We were 1 Green last time. There could be 4 Greens this time, and probably Dennis Canavan, the other one there, who's that Rebel MP in Falkirk West. So here's the picture of the Scottish Parliament. Again, it's all the opinion poll. This is not, don't take it too seriously, no real results giving us a forecast yet. 65 is the number you need to have an overall majority of the 129 members of the Scottish Parliament. And you'll notice here that in this poll, even though Labour are down a bit, they're still, with the Liberal Democrats in coalition as they were in the last Parliament, would be through the winning post quite comfortably, with between them about 71 seats. Conservatives on 10 there, the SNP at 34, and the SSP here with 9 members, Tommy Sheridan's SSP well up, and the others well up. So the big story here in Scotland looks like being, and it is confirmed by those 2 results we've had, there's going to be a shift from the main parties to these others.
Peter, thank you very much. We've got a tip that the SNP have taken Glasgow Govan from Labour. And we now go to Wales. We're talking about Scotland, the Welsh Assembly, all being elected yesterday. And Guito Harry is there in Cardiff. Guito.
Yes, good evening, David. We're all waiting in Wales to find out whether devolution has essentially broken the mould of Welsh politics. Certainly 4 years ago, it did break down that long-standing dominance of the Labour Party. They were defeated in some of their heartlands, and they failed to gain a majority in an institution they created themselves. They, tonight, are particularly keen to change that, not only regaining seats like the Rhondda, Islwyn, ideally Llanelli for them, but they want to get a majority in the Welsh Assembly. Will they manage that? With me is the Welsh Secretary. He doesn't sit in Cardiff, of course, but you do take a very close interest, Peter Hain. Do you think you are heading towards that majority tonight?
I can't be sure, because when you gain a seat from the constituency basis, you sometimes lose a list seat. This could happen in South and West Wales, for example, because we stand a good chance of gaining Llanelli back, in which case we might well lose our list seat. I'm also very encouraged. I'm pretty certain we're going to win Islwyn. It's looking very good in the Rhondda, and this, I think, will put great heart into the Labour Party in Wales, because we needed to win these seats after the dreadful performance in 1999.
Yes, it's still come to something when Tony Blair, the Labour leader, has to come to the marginal constituency of the Rhondda, hasn't it?
Well, it's a sign that we are taking our traditional Labour heartland areas like the Rhondda very seriously indeed, and perhaps we took them for granted in the past. Well, if you go to the Rhondda now, you see both the MP, Chris Bryant, the new Assembly member, Leighton Andrews, very energetic community campaigners. It's exactly what Labour should be doing, working very hard and not taking anything for granted, and I think this will stand us in good stead for the future.
How fundamental has been the soul-searching in the Labour Party in Wales? You changed the leadership, essentially, you changed the policies, you went for a more left-wing or slightly more distinctive left-wing agenda, a more Welsh agenda. It's been pretty fundamental, hasn't it?
It's a Welsh Labour agenda, and that's what devolution is designed to achieve, that you should have policies reflecting the interests of people in Wales. Wales is different values, different needs, and Scotland is different again. We are proud in the Labour Party at a UK level, under Tony Blair's leadership, of introducing devolution. And that's made a big difference. For example, we've got free bus passes for pensioners here in Wales, right across Wales. That doesn't apply anywhere else in the United Kingdom. If we get an overall majority for Labour, we'll have free prescriptions for every age group here in Wales. Very exciting Welsh Labour policies delivered by a National Assembly as a result of devolution.
I don't want to gratuitously rake over the past, but if it is a majority tonight, it will be a huge vote of confidence for Rhodri Morgan. And Rhodri Morgan, again, without dwelling on the past, is a man that Tony Blair and you at the time did everything you possibly could to prevent him becoming the leader of the Labour Assembly.
But that's in the past. Tony Blair's made it clear that was a mistake. We all accept that was a really bad episode in Welsh Labour's history. Everybody's learnt the lessons. I've worked very closely with Rhodri. He's been an outstanding leader of Welsh Labour, both in the Assembly and in this campaign. He's very popular, a great asset to us. And whether or not we get a majority, because it's actually arithmetically very difficult for us to get a majority, not quite as difficult as for Labour in Scotland, but the system makes it difficult. I think we'll do well tonight. I think that'll be a tribute to Rhodri, and I think the people of Wales are beginning to accept the Assembly more, that it can make a difference, as I say, in free bus passes for pensioners, free prescriptions under Labour for everybody, student grants already under Labour for Welsh students. And these are issues which are showing that really politics can make a difference, devolution has made a difference, and a Labour-led Welsh Assembly is making a big difference too.
If that kind of agenda does actually produce results for Labour tonight in Wales, as it appears initially to be doing, shouldn't you be going back to your next cabinet meeting next Thursday and saying, Tony Blair, what are we doing pursuing foundation hospitals, top-up tuition fees? That's not the way to actually encourage people to vote Labour. We did something totally different in Wales, and that made us more popular.
Well, it suited Wales, but...
It doesn't suit England?
Well, I think that you've got to look at policies applied to different parts of the United Kingdom. That, as I say, is what devolution is about. And when you look at foundation hospitals, for example, Welsh Labour's chosen not to apply them here, at least at this stage in Wales. We'll have to see which model works best. We don't know at the moment. I mean, waiting lists are much higher in Wales. We've suffered from this as a Labour a government in Wales than they are in England. They have actually been more successful under English health policies in bringing waiting lists down. So let's see how the two models work. Let's learn from each other. And I think Labour should be proud of devolving power to people in order to get the best policies to come through, and we learn from each other to see what those policies should be.
Peter Hain, thank you very much for joining us. We're expecting the first results within the next sort of half hour. Initial indications are that turnout in some places, we know one place has been confirmed at 25%. It's looking a bit higher than that overall, about 33, 34%. Disappointing, but in the end, people will be watching to see who actually is in charge, whether Labour has a majority or is it more coalition government. For now, from Wales, back to the studio.
Thanks very much. Well, now let's have a look with Peter Snow at the United Kingdom, or I should say Britain as a whole. Peter.
Well, David, here we are, the projected share settling down now at 34% for the Conservatives, 31% Labour, perhaps a little bit lower than 31, 30, hovering around there. And the Liberal Democrats, as I said earlier, on their best ever in recent memory, share of the vote in the local election of 30%. How do we judge the Tory position? Because after all, this is mid-term of the Parliament. They should be doing very well. How badly or how well are they doing? Well, let's put Ian Duncan Smith's face up on the screen and just remind ourselves of that famous battle cry he issued only a short time ago.
Do not underestimate the determination of a quiet man.
Well, now let me introduce our clapometer, because that 29% over there is the level of applause that Ian Duncan Smith's party was receiving when he made that speech. So there he is. Now, what level of applause does he need to win from the people of Britain if he's to win the general election? Listen. A lot is the answer, 42%. Now, how can we judge if he's going to get there? Well, all we can do is look at past opposition leaders in mid-term and compare that with how they then did in the subsequent general election. For a start, Margaret Thatcher doing well, 56% in mid-term. And at the time of the election, whoops, dropped down to 44. Still won the election, but a big drop. Next, Michael Foot riding high in mid-term. But the subsequent election, Labour collapsed. Neil Kinnock, pretty reasonably in mid-term, 37%. But again, at the subsequent election, he slipped and fell. Tony Blair doing very well in mid-term. Even better at the subsequent election. Just 2% up, though. Not very much, but he won the election, of course. William Hague, lacklustre in mid-term. Lacklustre, 33% at the subsequent election. So what does this tell us? What does this tell us about Ian Duncan Smith's chances? Well, remember again what his target is for the election of 2005. A hefty amount of applause of 42%. Now, what applause do we hear for Ian Duncan Smith at the moment? What is the Tory share of the vote, this projected share of the vote? There it is, 34%. Not very loud, distinctly quiet. Anyway, the other thing to say about this, of course, is that 34%, if history is any guide, and we've seen what sort of a guide it may be, the 34% is likely to drop between now and the next election rather than go up, unless, of course, he can do what Mr. Blair did and just buck the trend and push his vote up a little between now and the election. But on the whole, history suggests he won't. David.
That was fantastic.
And Matthew Parris of The Times. And David Mellor, I think, former Tory cabinet minister, is listening in on the conversation. We'll be able to talk to him in a moment. What do you make? What's going to be the headline story from this, Andrew?
I think the headline, whether this will actually be the headline, I think what it shows us is that it really confirms what we knew before these elections. Labour Party remains very dominant, an unprecedented period of dominance, certainly in terms of polling for any party since World War II. The Liberal Democrats making some nibbling gains as they do. And the Conservative Party, I do think Peter Snow's graphic there and his commentary illustrated it, still in the worst position for the principal opposition party of any principal opposition party, including Michael Foot's Labour Party in the early 80s, since World War II. I mean, to be a credible challenger for power at the next general election, they needed to be scoring at least low 40 points in this election. And they haven't, which is why Tories are talking about other leaders, of which Mr Howard is a name I increasingly hear coming back into the frame as well, although he will deny that as well.
But he's shaking his head. Crispin Blunt, is he onto something then?
This, I honestly say, I don't know. If it is part of a plot, it seems a slightly half-cocked way to start it. But you have to remember, one of William Hague's rather poisonous legacies to his successor was that it only takes 25 signatures. Only 25 Tory MPs have to decide they want to trigger a no-confidence vote in their leader. And if he can't carry the majority, he's out, he's gone, and new people then come in. So it doesn't necessarily hold true that the 25 have to agree on who's going to be the successor. As long as there's 25 Tory MPs who are discontented enough or panicked enough to do it, it's always possible at any time that they will put this gun to the leader's head.
What percentage did you get when you stood for the leadership? What was your vote?
I've no idea. It wasn't done in percentages. It was a very long time ago.
How many votes?
But
How many votes did you get? I'm just wondering, because you were twinkling and then you were shaking your head when the possibility of leadership was
absolute
put forward.
poppycock. Can we get back to the real world? We're on track to win 300 seats as a result of these local elections. 11 councils. We're clearly ahead. We're the biggest party in local government in England, if you measure it by the number of councillors or by the number of councils. But as I said at the outset, I don't think this has any bearing on national politics, any bearing at all on the outcome of the next election, which is going to be fought on different issues in a different political
David, hold on. Matthew Parris.
I think it's very hard to read triumph or disaster for any party in what we've seen so far. As for Crispin Blunt, Andrew's hedging a little bit here. I won't. Tomorrow's press seems to have decided that it's all gone off half-cock. I'm not so sure. It won't be too difficult for him to get the 25. Some say that he's got the 25 already. And though he has spoken out of turn, he hasn't said anything out loud that lots of Tories are not saying and haven't been saying, and quite passionately, privately. And I have a feeling that this rumble against the leadership is going to grow rather than die away again.
All right. Well, David Mellor is listening to this, former Tory cabinet minister. Mr. Mellor, what do you make of the state of the Tory party tonight?
Pretty awful, isn't it? I mean, the Tories have done okay, but no better than okay. If they were a serious and credible threat to Labour, who, after all, after 6 years, their domestic agenda is in relative disarray, the Tories would be over 40% tonight. They're not. And I think that Crispin Blunt is probably saying what an awful lot of Tories know in their hearts, and that is that Mr Duncan Smith is a no-hoper, and as long as he remains leader, it's doubtful the Tories will ever be elected.
Is it him or the policies that the Tory party is pursuing?
No, well, I don't know about... I mean, it's not... Mr Duncan Smith was elected as a pretty far-out right-winger and then trimmed a bit, and it's not quite clear where he is, somewhere in the muddled middle. But I think that politics is about personalities these days. And unfortunately, with the exception, of course, of Michael, a veteran of older, better regimes, it's hard to say that any of the new faces that were supposed to relaunch the Tory party, that any of them have made any impact on the voters at all. I think the trouble with Ian Duncan Smith is that he is unkissed by any kind of special genius. You know, even with British politics in its present state, in order to be a successful leader, you've got to have something out of the ordinary. When you look at Mr Duncan Smith's career as an army officer, in business, in politics, there's no evidence that he has anything special to offer. And the public are aware of this. You know, whatever the manifold deficiencies of the Labour government, which are many and various, Tony Blair is a man of distinction. He proved that during the Iraq War. Duncan Smith is unkissed by any distinction. And this idea that he's going to sweep to victory, talking about being a quiet man, is just for the birds. And my view is, if the Tories get rid of him now, they've got a chance. Well, if they don't get rid of him, they've got no chance at all.
Well, obviously, if you were still an MP, you'd be one of the signatories of one of the 25 who'd asked for a leadership challenge. Who would you like to see as leader?
Well, the Tories aren't exactly spoiled for choice. You know, if it was a Premiership football team, they'd go off to Transylvania with an open chequebook and sign a few Transylvanian superstars, wouldn't they? I don't think there's any alternative but to go to the old and bold. I think some combination of Ken Clarke, Michael Portillo, even indeed the great Michael Howard himself might be a possibility. But I just think that what they need is some semblance of ability, someone who's able to land a punch, someone who can punch his weight, someone who can expose the manifest failings of the government. At the moment, that just isn't happening, and people, you know, they may be disillusioned with politics. I think what we're seeing tonight are two things. We're seeing people choosing to vote Liberal Democrat rather than Tory in key urban areas, cities like Birmingham and Bristol, where the Tories used to be powerful and they no longer are. But we're also seeing apathy. People are just not turning out to vote. We've had apathy at general elections, we've had apathy at local government elections, and I think that until the Tories discover someone who, when he punches, you know, the person who he punches falls over, they've had it.
Okay, David Mellor, thank you very much. You wanted to come in on this?
The big problem for Tories who don't like Ian Duncan Smith is there is absolutely no settled alternative. There are people who like Ken Clarke, and there are people in the Conservative Party who'd sooner cut their throats than have Ken Clarke. The person whose campaign is probably ready to go is David Davis, and yet there is not a great sort of sense in the country that there's a great surge of support for him. So before they decide, to get rid of the current leader, they better have some idea who they want to put in its place, and they don't.
But people like David Davis, who everybody have said for a long time, is sort of waiting his turn, perhaps privately conspiring. Do you think he's embarrassed by this sudden announcement by Mr Blunt that he wants a challenge?
Well, I saw him going into Conservative Central Office earlier on. I'm sure he's putting out loyal statements as we speak. He didn't want to stop and talk to the cameras at that stage, is all I can tell you.
Can I say something about this, David? Because I think this is an absolutely astonishing conversation. If you want to talk about things other than local election results, why not talk about the deep split in the cabinet about the euro? Why not talk about the deep split in the cabinet about foundation hospitals? Why not talk about the fact that more Labour backbenchers voted against their government on Iraq than Labour backbenchers voted in favour of their government on Iraq? If we're here to talk about the local election results, we're doing very well in these local elections. We're on track to win 300 seats, 10 times as many as we thought we might. We've won 11 councils already, and I really question.
One of the reasons we do talk about this is because people in your own party set these local elections as a test for your leader. You know that.
I really question, with all due respect to my old friend David Mellor, why the BBC have seen fit to bring David on to say the things he said tonight when we ought to be talking about the local election results or about the splits in the government.
Can I just say, it's a good try, but it's tonight's story. That's why we're talking about it. I'll bring you in, Tessa, but Matthew Parris, we wait to get in.
As Andrew says, that there is no obvious successor to Ian Duncan Smith, but there was no obvious successor to Ted Heath when Margaret Thatcher became leader. There was no obvious successor to Margaret Thatcher when John Major became leader. Until the existing leader begins to stumble, the obvious successor doesn't emerge. Now, I know we're all saying Crispin Blunt's nobody, he's a loner, he represents no one, but he's a former army officer. He's just the kind. Absolutely, he's just the kind of person who would have voted for Ian Duncan Smith in the leadership election. And you drew from him the remark earlier this evening that he had done so. There are tens of thousands of Crispin Blunt-like characters in the Conservative Party, in the associations across the country, and I guess they're thinking as he is.
So maybe it's Crispin Blunt. Hold on, Tessa Giles, I promised you a say.
To go back to Andrew's point, which I think is an important one. I mean, the story of tonight is really, you know, what has happened to the Tories? Are the Tories anywhere near getting liftoff that gives them any chance at all of being electable at the next election? They are way below the 40% share of the vote that they need. And the problem is not just Ian Duncan Smith, problem though he clearly is for the party, but you know the report of Theresa May's think tank, the Sea Change report, you know, describes the Tory party as having the DNA of an unelectable party. It's a systematic problem.
Party in local government then? Why are we going to win 300 seats tonight?
Well, let's wait and see.
Why have we got more councillors than you have in local government?
Let's go and hear a little bit more about the Tory party from Maidenhead and join Laura Trevelyan. Laura.
Well, David, of course, were it not for Mr Blunt, this would have been a passable night for the Conservatives, but as it is, the question of Ian Duncan Smith's leadership is once more laid bare. So what is the future for the party? Joining me now is Ed Vaizey, among others. Ed is the Conservative candidate for Wantage. Ed, if you were an MP, would you be trying to trigger a leadership contest now?
No, absolutely not, and I can't understand why Crispin Blunt has done this. He's got out of bed at the wrong side. I don't know really what he's done it. I mean, I'm now a foot soldier working on the ground, trying to get Conservatives elected. We've taken control of South Oxfordshire, which is part of my constituency. We've made gains in the Vale of the White Horse. And, you know, the Tories are coming back slowly but surely, and we don't need another row. We've got to stop talking to ourselves. We've got to start talking to the voters.
What we need is policies, isn't it? Nicholas Bowles works for Sea Change, that think tank. We were just hearing about your research, which is in The Guardian today. Apparently the Conservatives are invisible, washed up, hopeless. Where do you go from here?
No, the point of the research that we did was to show what the Conservatives need to do to get back into power in a general election. We've had a very good result today. We should put it under our belts. It should give us a spring in our step. But we should focus on the task ahead, which is to appeal to voters who've never voted Conservative before.
And do you think Ian Duncan Smith is going to appeal to those voters? I mean, Crispin Blunt said he wasn't.
I think we're well on the way, and I think that Ian Duncan Smith will rightly flap Mr Blunt away like a rather annoying fly and get on with the job.
Matthew Taylor of the IPPR, you're familiar, of course, as a Labour figure with all these splits and trying to rebound a party. What do you think the Conservatives can do? Where can they go from here?
Well, I think Ed and Nicholas are in denial. I think what's happened tonight is the Conservatives have done reasonably well as a party that has now emerged like the Liberal Democrats, as a party you vote for locally if you don't like the Labour Party, but it's not actually considered to be a party that can win at a national level. And the Conservatives will only make progress when they can do two things. They have to, first of all, define the problem. What is the problem with Britain, which they are the solution to? And secondly, they have to have some ideological clarity. They have to have some ideological clarity.
What is the problem,
Well,
Ed Vaizey?
I think that's the point. We haven't defined the problem because we think
have you been doing for the last 6
because
years?
we've been looking in at ourselves and saying we are the problem. And what we've got to do is look at what affects the people I talk to today, their schools and their hospitals, and come up with some radical policies. Now, Ian Duncan Smith gave a very encouraging interview earlier this week when he said, you know, we were going
Which
to
he said we're going to win the general election.
We're going to enter phase 2 and start communicating those policies. And I think what the Tory party needs to do, which it hasn't done for a decade now, is to show people that we live in Britain, we care about Britain, we're passionate about Britain, and we want to make it better.
Nicholas Bowles, is Ian Duncan Smith going to lead the Conservatives to victory?
I think he has a very good chance, and I hope he gets full support of his party. And you have to remember where we sit here. We sit between 1 week, about 6 weeks ago, when the Prime Minister nearly lost his job. He was worried about it. And another week, next week, when there's going to be the biggest revolt in the Labour Party against a piece of domestic legislation for many,
and
many
you're
years.
marooned on 34%
I think that is an opposition that I quite look forward to challenging.
But what are you going to, I mean, how are you going to recover from this? Whenever you look like moving
Recover
forward,
from
like
this?
tonight,
Excuse me.
somebody
We are ahead in the popular vote. Some guy who I've never heard of, and I'm a Conservative,
He's
and
an
I'm
MP.
involved in this, and I've never heard of him. Some guy goes off, he wants to get a bit of attention, and he puts himself in the newspapers with some silly scheme. That is not the reality of today. That is not the reality of tomorrow. It is not the reality of the next 2 years, which is going to be the Tory party.
So, Ed Vaizey, what are the policies? What are 3 policies the Conservatives
there is
need
a
at the next
serious
election?
there is a serious point here, which is I think that a lot of Conservatives who get wobbly and worry about how the Conservative Party is doing look to the top and think it must be a problem with the leadership, and it's not a problem with the leadership. It's a problem with the whole attitude and mentality of the Conservative Party. As I keep saying, the Conservative Party has to look outward. If you ask me for 3 policies, I'd be looking at policies that would devolve power down in the NHS to allow more doctors to take more control over policies. I'd look to devolve more power down to schools, and I'd look to stop the Labour tax rises that are coming in, where Labour's claiming that it's invested 50% more in our public services, and made absolutely no difference at all.
But isn't the fact, Nicholas, though, that
of the BBC, I have to say, to dwell in its coverage tonight on the fact that some random MP, irresponsible actions, rather than the fact that the Tory party has come ahead in the popular vote, has won councils, has won seats, that the Labour Party is barely ahead of the Liberal Democrats in the polls.
But would you deny that what Crispin Blunt said reflects what a lot of Conservative activists feel, as we heard from one here earlier tonight?
One does not make a lot in my book, and I do deny it.
Well, Ed Vasey, Nicholas Bowles and Matthew Taylor, thank you all very much. And David, back to you.
Good. Well, we have a few more results. Let's just see the full form of them. In Mansfield, a rather interesting result, Mansfield. It had an independent mayor elected last year, and now it's been taken by the independents. Labour down 24 and independents up 25. So from Labour it moves to independent. Brighton and Hove, Labour lose control of Brighton and Hove. All the seats were up there, all the council seats. And the new position, Labour down 20, the Conservatives down 3. The Greens, interestingly, up 3 in Brighton and Hove. Remember, changes in seats mean that these figures don't always add up to 0, so to speak, the pluses and the minuses. Torbay, the Conservatives lose to the Liberal Democrats. Liberal Democrats up 20, the Conservatives down 21. And Oldham, from no overall control to Labour. The BNP made no headway there at all, and Labour up 6, the Liberal Democrats down 5. Now, let's go to Guildford, and we join Carl Mercer there. Carl.
Yeah, David, this was supposed to be the Lib Dems' gateway to Surrey, if you like, their foothold in the South East home counties. But it looks like it's good news for Ian Duncan-Smith down here, despite Crispin Blunt's comments in the neighbouring constituency of Reigate. It looks like the Tories are actually going to take control here in Guildford. It's the first time they've been in control here since 1987, and that comes something of a surprise because the Lib Dems, of course, took the parliamentary seat here 2 years ago from the Tories. And the Tories are saying a lot of it is to do with the fact that there was postal voting here, tried here for the first time, and the turnout extremely high, 54% on average, and in some of the wards as high as 70%. The Tories say they've been pushing hard on that. They're seeing this very much as a foothold in Surrey, re-establishing themselves here and trying to win back the seats like Guildford that they lost in the last election.
Oh, right. Wait, I just want to... I thought you were leaving us, Tessa. Oh, you were asked to leave. Stay for just a moment longer. I just want us to have a look at the overall position on councillors here, if we can do that. This is how things stand now. We're almost halfway through with these results. Conservatives up 197, Labour down 332, and Liberal Democrats up 65. I don't know how that compares with the benchmarks. Michael Howard... the Tories needed something between, 200 and 500 gains to be doing well tonight. They said they were going to get... just don't interrupt a moment. They said 400, didn't they, privately? That was what was reported.
No, we didn't. That's quite untrue.
That was a false report.
It was. We thought that we would win 30 seats. We look as though we're going to win 300 seats. And if I can just give you an example, at Castle Point, which we just gained control of, we've won no fewer than 22 seats on that council. So this is actually an extremely good night for the Conservative Party. We're doing very well in terms of winning councils. We're doing very well in terms of winning council seats. We've, I think, already won 11 councils. We're on track to win 20, and we're on track to win 300 seats or more. So that is, by any reckoning, a good night. I'm very grateful for it because I think it means that many more people in this country will be living under good Conservative councils from now on. They'll get better performance for a lower council tax, and they will be better off.
How do you read it, Tessa Giles? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, if we look at the Labour vote, the picture is certainly variable. But I think it's important to remember that we were defending something like 25 councils this evening, where the loss of 1 or 2 wards meant that we lost overall control of the council or lost the council altogether. We're in the midterm. You know, although principally local elections are about local issues, I think that it's also clear that the national political situation has had an impact in parts, but you know, at the end of the day, the fact is that the Tory opposition are way off getting the kind of recovery or lift-off they need to be a credible opposition. They are way off the 40% that they need.
First of all, I think the Conservatives insulted everybody's intelligence with this estimate of 30 as their target. Not a single independent psevologist thought that it was laughable. It was laughable. It was laughable, and always was. It always was. Well, I will tell you, Michael, when the numbers are crunched and the articles are written for the weekend papers, they will say that you have trod water. The Liberal Democrats have made some reasonable advances, and the difference from what Andrew Rawnsley was saying, in 2001 we were on 22% in nationwide elections. Last year we were on 28%. This year we're on 30%. That is a party on the move in the right direction. But the challenge of these elections is that how we move from making progress to passing an opposition that is in serious trouble, and that is a challenge.
Be fair, you always do better in local elections. What you don't then do is translate into national vote.
We do. And what we also have to acknowledge, we're looking at these different council results, council by council. There was no pattern there. They were all over the place. The independents sweeping in one place, the Conservatives doing very well in another place, suddenly Labour doing well. And then we've got these overall figures, and these are percentages of a much lower turnout. I mean, this is 20 and 30% of a relatively low turnout. I just think we have to be very, very careful in extrapolating from these forward to a possible general election result.
OK. Let's join Peter Snow now, who's got some news on the effect of all this on Labour. Peter.
David, it is indeed, just to pick up what Andrew and co were saying, I mean, there's a tantalising picture for the Liberal Democrats. Look at them. This is a change. This is a change this vote represents compared with the general election a couple of years ago. And look, if only the Liberal Democrats would say, if only we could do that in a general election, plus 11%, pushing Labour down 12% and leaving the Tories sitting like that, we would win a general election or get jolly close to it. But of course, as Andrew Rawnsley was saying, the trouble for the Liberal Democrats again and again and again is that they do well in local elections and they can't do it in the general election. However, it must be said, this is a better advance than we've ever seen from the Liberal Democrats before. However, let's just go somewhere else. Look how badly Labour are doing compared with the general election. But just look at this. This is what we asked people to tell us about the Labour Party. First of all, Tony Blair. We asked people to tell us what they thought he looked like. Did he look like a principled Prime Minister? 69% said yes. Did he look as if he's world respected? 63% said he was respected around the world. The only thing that people seem to say against him as a statesman was that he spent too much time abroad. More than half the people thought that. But let me just say this. Last year, we did exactly the same questions for ICM last year. More people thought he was abroad too much than do this year, so it doesn't seem to do too much damage. And last year, fewer people thought he was principled, and it was just about as many thought he was well respected. So the Iraq War hasn't done Mr. Blair any harm as a statesman. What about Blair the man? Well, a year ago, 43% thought he was tough, a tough Prime Minister. Now, today, it's up to 54%. Perhaps that's not surprising after a war. What about a nice man? Is Mr. Blair a nice man? We asked them last year. More than 2/3 said yes then. And now here he is after a war. Do we still think he's a nice man? Well, yes. 2/3 still think he's a nice man. So he's nice, but he's tougher. What can go wrong with Tony Blair as a leader? Politician, some things can. Look at this. Here we have the politician, Tony Blair. Is there too much spin in Downing Street? 2/3 say yes. Is there too presidential a Prime Minister around? More than half say yes, there is. He's still there's too little collegiality about the cabinet, about Tony Blair's leadership. 51% think he's too influenced by the rich. Again, it has to be said that is a little bit down from last year. But now, just look at this. On this crucial criterion of government's success, how will they do on the economy? Who do you trust to run the economy? Here we are 6 years into this Labour government with 47% saying, yes, we trust Labour to run the economy. How many say Conservative? only 28%. And the poor old Liberal Democrats down here on this crucial issue that will be absolutely central to the next general election, just 14%. So look at that lead 6 years into this Labour government. On the other hand, we asked people last year and this year whether they thought Labour had delivered on delivering a strong economy. They promised back in '97 to deliver a strong economy. Last year, 61% said yes, they delivered. Now it's a little bit less. It's 50%. So a little less happiness about Labour delivering on its promises that it gave way back in '67. Education, education, education. Have they delivered? 37% only thought yes last year. Now it's down to 30%. And on the NHS, save the NHS. We'll save the NHS, said Labour 6 years ago. 31% said yes, they delivered on that a year ago. That's now down to 29%. So Tony Blair clearly is right to concentrate now after the war, which hasn't done him any harm, to concentrate on these domestic issues because support is just falling off on all of these issues. David.
Well, I think in a moment we're going to hear from Charles Clarke, the Secretary of State for Education, who will no doubt be listening to that fall in support from 37 to 30%. But first we have two teachers on this very important subject joining us from Birmingham. John.
Thank you very much, David. Well, Labour have lost overall control of Birmingham. They've taken a hammering because of their stance on the war in Iraq. It also looks likely, locally at least, that education could have been an issue. As you say, I've got two of Birmingham, John McNally from St Bernadette's Primary. Elspeth, let's start with you. We heard Peter Snow there say that in terms of people's perception as to whether or not Labour are delivering on education, people seem less convinced now than they were a year ago. How do you see it here from Birmingham? Do you believe that Labour are fulfilling their promises, particularly in terms of getting more money into schools like yours?
Though education's doing really very well in Birmingham, the standards are really rising, all the head teachers in the city are really concerned about money because we keep being told there's new money for this, that and the other, and all that seems to be happening is it seems to be shuffling from one piggy bank to another piggy bank. It doesn't seem like new money at all, and certainly although our money has gone up in school, what's happening is that all the various things to do with pay, to do with pensions, to do with national insurance are all going up, and it means we haven't actually got any more. And in many schools, of course, across the country, they've not got enough to even pay for this. And they're having to sack teachers at a time of teacher shortage, and when we're all trying to raise standards, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
John McNally, the Education Secretary, I think is listening to what you've got to say. We know delivery is the key for the government. What would be your message to the Education Secretary tonight?
Well, I would have complimented the Labour government over the first X number of years in government because there has been a marked increase in funding. This year we've come to a stuttering halt. 2 or 3 months ago, all the teacher associations, with the exception of one, and other allied unions to do with non-teaching help and whatnot, signed an agreement with Mr Clarke for new funding to arrive. We saw some of this funding arrive, but it's been completely absorbed, as my colleague says, in teacher salaries, in increases in national insurance and pensions as well. So we're at a threshold of doubt at the moment, and the money is not there, and across the land, and it permeates through from head teachers to government.
Everything you claim to have done of putting more money in, 17% have an actual cash decrease in the coming year. What's gone wrong?
Nothing's gone wrong, David. What the situation is that it is the joint shared responsibility of myself and our central government department on the one hand, and local government on the other, city councils like Birmingham we were just talking to there, to fund schools. We've allocated a very substantial increase in expenditure, and authorities have been passing it on to schools in a way which has been variable. I completely understand that, but we're publishing the figures tomorrow to entirely assess the situation. We're in regular discussion with the National Association of Head Teachers. Office in Whitehall or Westminster simply isn't sustainable. What I do think is the case is we have to see exactly where the resources have gone and where they are, and that's why tomorrow we'll be publishing data for every local educational in the country based on their own returns and their own assessment to indicate how more resources can be made available to deal with the particular problems. And what I do is call upon local education authorities to work with their schools like Whalley Grange in Manchester and other schools in Birmingham and their local teachers to decide how they can sort this problem out. And I believe believe that we can sort it out, and I believe the assurance, particularly for future years, which is worrying people, the people that you interviewed earlier on from Birmingham, has to be sorted out, and I'm determined we will.
And do you think it's one of the reasons why you lost control of Birmingham? Worries about education?
I don't actually. I'm interested in the analysis, and obviously I haven't seen the results in detail. But I was in Birmingham campaigning on education during the course of this campaign, and the story that I was getting when I was in Birmingham was positive about education generally. Now, I don't know what the factors are in which particular wards it's arisen. I do know that there are concerns, but I have no reason to believe that that's the reason why we've lost, unfortunately, control of that great city. I also look at the other cities, though, that we've won tonight, places like Sheffield and Plymouth, and I feel delighted that people have given us the confidence to run those local authorities.
Charles Clarke, thank you very much indeed for joining us. News just in that the Labour Party have lost one seat in the Scottish Assembly in Strathkelvin and Bearsden to an independent anti-hospital closure candidate. Now, in the Wyre Forest, the Kidderminster Hospital Group didn't make any headway. In fact, they lost a couple of seats. But in Scotland, they've lost one of the seats to the Scottish Parliament. So there we are. Let's hear now a bit about, from Tony Blair's constituency. We go to Sedgefield, and Vicky Young has been there talking to people in the constituency. Vicky.
David, Labour activists have spent the last few weeks out campaigning, trying to get the Labour vote out. They've been looking very closely at results here in Sedgefield, but also at what's going on elsewhere in the country, to see if the war in Iraq has had any effect on the vote and also on Tony Blair's personal standing. You won't be surprised to hear that they don't all agree on this. First of all, Rita, do you think that the Prime Minister did the right thing, or do you think he's ignored the wishes of the party?
I think the Prime Minister did absolutely the right thing, and you can see that in Iraq. The people in Iraq are now free from a very brutal and vicious dictator, and the world is a safer place.
But he's ignored Labour Party members. That's crucial, isn't it?
No, I don't think he's ignored Labour Party members. I don't think there's where is the evidence that that's the case? Certainly the Labour Party here locally is fully supportive of the Prime Minister and the stance that he's taken on this.
Now, Derek, do you think that that's true? Do you think the Labour Party voters and members are right behind the Prime Minister on this?
Well, I remain opposed to a war which I believe was not necessary, not lawful and not supported. I've no idea what the effect of the war is likely to be on today's elections, but I would have thought that it must definitely have an effect on Labour Party activists. I saw lots and lots of Labour Party people on the big march against the war, and if the majority of the party are against the war, that must surely then have an effect on the enthusiasm of activists actually to get involved.
Now, Sharon, young people got very involved in this, didn't they? Do you think that they still feel that motivated?
I don't think so, no. I think they've sort of tailed off and joined on the bandwagon and said, well, it's been a good thing that, because it's all sort of coming to a close now. And I think they've just lost interest in it now. A lot of things are moving on with like A-levels and things like that. So I think people have just lost interest in it totally.
Now, the big crucial thing here, isn't it, with the war in Iraq, Billy, is that the weapons of mass destruction haven't been found. So actually, the case for the war hasn't really been made.
Well, the only problem I have with it is that first of all, that Tony Blair and President Bush should have gone in 12 weeks before they did. The fact that the fact that the weapons of mass destruction haven't been found or traced yet, I believe, is an incidental. I think the problem is
the reason he gave for coming to the war.
Yes, I agree with that. But I think the main reason is, regardless of the reasons that he gave, is that there were people who were sorely oppressed. You've got to be a funny sort of people to blow your own up and to poison and gas them. And of course, originally and eventually within this country, and as proved in the news today, that not only are the fundamentalists working over there, but they're also in the UK.
So that's the question here. John, do you agree with that domestically, Tony Blair's maybe not that interested?
Well, I don't think he's ever been particularly interested in the domestic agenda. He likes playing the world stage and things of that nature. But in terms of this thing about weapons of mass destruction and not important, that was the whole basis of the whole war. And now we're turning it round to say, oh, we got rid of a dictator, so let's have a war with China, let's have a war with Burma, let's have a war with most of the countries in Africa.
When the weapons are found, then, John, you will say yet this was a just war.
Well,
Will you say that when the weapons are found?
When the weapons,
they are going to be
you mean
found?
when the weapons are planted?
When the now.
Can I just come in on this?
Yeah. So you have a different argument then.
Go on, Red.
Tony Blair is not a good statesman or politician. For the domestic in this country, I think, is the biggest load of rubbish that I've listened to for a long time. He's brought all kinds of new things in. He's brought the national minimum wage.
But he wants to bring in more
family
things. Do you
tax
think
credits.
he's going to be able to do
And
it?
I don't think that the people of this country have any right to say that at all about him.
He's brought all of that in, and yet people like Marks and Spencers are still using the sweatshops of India. Black and Decker have left Spennymoor in his own constituency and gone out to Eastern Europe because of the minimum wage.
Defend Mr. Blair there, your friend.
Well, it's going to be proved in future that he's led a radical Labour government. I mean, they say that he's not bothered about this country, and I know the trade unions amongst us. We've had letters of congratulation. The minimum wage, the working family tax credit, the right to join a trade union, the things about the parents now, the rights for parents,
But foundation
part-time
hospitals,
workers.
Labour MPs don't want that, do they?
Well, I don't think people understand what foundation hospitals are. It's the same with PFI. Providing that the National Health Service is free at the point of entry, then it doesn't matter who provides the money.
We've had 6 new hospitals in 6 years in County Durham and Darling, and we hadn't had one for 25 years under the Tories.
There, we have to leave it on the domestic issues. I think Mr. Blair probably got some trouble ahead, certainly with his own MPs.
They're never constructive.
They're certainly not going to agree on it here tonight. Back to the studio.
Vicky Young, thanks very much. Well, now I think we should have a look at Scotland and Wales, these Parliament and Assembly votes. No local election results from Scotland. There were no local elections in Wales. But let's just turn to Scotland for a moment. The results are gradually coming in of these constituencies. These are the first votes. There's a top-up system of proportional representation on a regional basis, which follows to give parties that don't win outright control on a first-past-the-post system. But these are the first-past-the-post results. Labour losing Strathkelvin and Bearsden to an independent, hospital independent, against the closure of a hospital, and the Labour vote halving in that constituency. Labour retaining other central belt seats, but Labour and the SNP vote overall declining, and a rather poor turnout in Scotland too. The Scottish Socialists dramatically increasing their share of the vote in Labour-held seats. Pensioner Party looking like to win seats on the top-up. Well, that will all come tomorrow. The story in Wales so far, Labour regained its Lewin from Plaid Cymru. Plaid's vote more than halved, so Plaid Cymru not doing well there. We haven't, I think, had a result from the Rhondda yet. I may be wrong on that, but I think we haven't. And the turnout, again, falling. So devolution not sending out very good signals tonight, with the number of people actually going to the polls falling. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but let's just look at devolution and the 4-year-old attempt to take powers away from Westminster to Edinburgh and to Cardiff, and hear this report from Brian Taylor.
Work in progress. The new homes for new politics in Scotland and Wales still lie unfinished. In Edinburgh, the new Parliament building at the foot of the Royal Mile, overdue and over budget, has become an icon for those who feel devolution has fallen short of expectations. In Cardiff, contractual wrangling has left a hole in the ground where a new Assembly building will rise. Billboards exhort the people to vote. Snag is, this message about the power of the Welsh Assembly was displayed in Edinburgh. It was hastily pulled down. Many, especially in Scotland, had hoped for more at the outset.
Well, the most important day in my life, I think. I think it's the first step for a really marvellous future.
It all began grandly, a royal opening with the Scottish crown jewels on display for Scotland's first Parliament since the Union 3 centuries earlier. The verdict now?
I don't think they made a good job of it. It's not what they promised us initially.
Most things of that nature, it's a waste of money.
Perhaps politics everywhere is in disrepute. Certainly the Scottish Parliament is major league. MSPs are in charge of health, schools, universities, crime, the environment. They make the law in Scotland, 62 acts in 4 years. And they decide their own policies, distinct from Westminster. Free personal care for the elderly, no student tuition fees. MSPs even work together across party lines. Elections, of course, stop all that. The new politics which has been built here in Scotland is coalition politics. That means that Labour and the Liberal Democrats, having rubbed along together pretty well for the last 4 years in government, are fighting these elections as entirely separate parties with entirely separate manifestos. It also means that if the Scottish National Party want to take power in the Scottish Parliament, they're going to need a buddy. And that could prove difficult if they continue to insist on their referendum on independence, which they do. Certainly that buddy won't be the Tories, the SNP won't deal with them, and in any case there's little sign of Conservative recovery. But PR voting creates other options.
Vote against those parties, brothers and sisters!
Polls suggest Tommy Sheridan's anti-war, anti-poverty populism could win more seats for his Socialist Party. Same goes for the Greens, although protests against the established parties sometimes fall down. But who'll occupy the driving seat in Scottish politics? Probably still Labour and the Lib Dems, if they can steer through their differences. Labour wants an extra hard line on crime, the Lib Dems want council voting reform. But will any of it help to make the voters feel included? Devolution in Wales started as a more fragile affair than in Scotland, endorsed by a whisker. The National Assembly of Wales has less power. It can't enact primary legislation. Enthusiasts say it's exploited the powers it does have to freeze prescription charges for key groups and bring in free bus passes for the elderly. But there's still cynicism.
To me, they've done nothing except argue and fight and stab each other in the back.
The National Health Service, for instance, is Jane Hutt, is pathetic.
After a period of Labour minority, the party formed a pact with the Liberal Democrats.
And Jeff has been through the Liberal Democrat manifesto with a fine tooth comb.
But of course, the two are fighting as separate parties, with the Lib Dems dreaming of gains and Labour dreaming of sole power.
How much do we know about, which parts of the brain operate what now?
Plaid Cymru will look to consolidate their advance.
Have a green one. You must have a green one.
Right, wait a minute, I've got to get my rosette. Where's my rosette? Where are we going into the market?
While the Tories may be privately happy to hold what they have. For the future, a commission is considering reform plans in Wales, possibly moving towards matching Scotland's powers.
I think it's there, and you've got to make the most of what's there. I think, a lot of people didn't want it, but it's there, it's in place, and people should be supporting it and making it work properly rather than being against it.
So, the anthem of devolved power is sounding confidently, but not yet completely in harmony with the people.
So, Pippa Norris, what do you make, what's the message about devolution that's coming through tonight after the first 4 years of the Parliament and the Assembly?
I think one of the key lessons from this for Scotland is that voters are learning about the new electoral system. Last time, 1999, people didn't really understand. It was kind of a complex system. But now what we're seeing is that on the first vote, what we're going to get probably is, again, a Labour-Lib Dem coalition, exactly as the system was intended to produce, in some ways, coalition politics, rather than the simple parliamentary system in Westminster. And the minor parties and the independents are probably doing very, very well. The Scottish Socialists, independents. All one has to do is look at the Strathkelvin and Bearsden. That was with a majority of 12,000 that Labour used to have. It was taken over by an independent. That's a radical change. So I think voters are really making a distinction between the two. And
what about the actual turnout? What about people bothering to go and vote?
Well, it was 50%. It was also raining buckets, I've been told, in Scotland. It wasn't good for turnout in general. But I don't think we should take a lower turnout as necessarily any sign of dissatisfaction with devolution or indeed with the Scottish Parliament. Instead, I think people are saying there aren't that many differences between the parties right now. The SNP is not pressing on independence. They're not pressing for tax increases. So people weren't excited by the election, but it doesn't mean to say in any way that they don't approve of the Scottish Parliament or want basically to see it strengthened.
Well, Jack McConnell, the leader of the Scottish Parliament, or First Minister, is listening to this. Tony King, what's your message to him? And what do you think this election shows about devolution?
one thing I think it's becoming very clear in Scotland, and it's already clear in England, is that an awful lot of people are fed up with the political class. They're fed up with politicians, they're fed up with the major parties. We see that in the rising support for all kinds of fringe groups of one kind or another. Now in Scotland, of course, that's taking the particular form of Strathkelvin and Bearsden we've just heard about. It sounds as though a pensioners' party may get a couple of top-up seats, and not least that extraordinary chap Tommy Sheridan's Scottish Socialist Party looks as though it may possibly gain several top-up seats and become a very considerable force in the Scottish Parliament.
Okay, Jack McConnell, everybody banned his figures. I've got here the research by the National Centre of Social Research in Scotland. 62% of the people of Scotland, the latest figure, and the figure's been rising steadily, think that having devolved government does nothing for better government. How do you account for that?
Well, I think both that challenge, that result, and also the turnout here today across Scotland are a serious challenge to politicians, to political parties, and probably even to the media as well, David, to make politics and government more meaningful, to explain the choices more clearly, to be on the side of the people and dealing with their priorities, and to be listening and acting on the things that people care about in their day-to-day lives. And I think that's the clear challenge to us for the second term of a Scottish Parliament, is to get back on the side of the people, back listening to them, and make sure that their concerns and their interests are at the heart of what we do.
But do you think that devolution has been a success in these first 4 years? There doesn't seem to be that much enthusiasm for it.
Well, I think there have been some achievements and there have been some disappointments. That's been a core theme in my campaign in this election, that we need to build on the achievements, but we also need to learn from the disappointments too. And in the second term of the Parliament, ensure that government in Scotland is focused on the real priorities that matter to people, that politicians are seen to listen and then to act, and also that we do explain more clearly, and the media can help here, we explain more clearly the real differences that exist between parties. In this age, people don't understand fully or don't accept fully that there are real differences between political parties, and I certainly want to make sure that that is clearer in the years to come, as well as ensuring, if I'm hopefully in government again, ensuring that we are acting on the interests of ordinary people and taking up their concerns.
Jack McConnell, thank you very much for joining us. Let's just briefly look at Wales then. Again, we haven't had many results in, but Peter Snow, as ever, has an analysis of what it is that has happened. Peter.
Well, David, it's a pretty view across Cardiff Bay, but not quite what we see today, because they designed this new Welsh Assembly, which will have 60 members, not 129 as in Scotland. They designed it, rather fine-looking building, but a lot of fuss about the cost of it and so on, so not quite on the way to being finished yet. When it is finished, it'll house the new Welsh Assembly. And an opinion poll is all we've got at the moment to go on, because there's no sign of results or forecast yet from Wales. Rhodri Morgan, if our opinion poll is right, this is HTV NOP opinion poll, Labour on something like 30, 60 members altogether at this Assembly, Labour on 30, up 2, so Labour looking like doing a little better in Wales than they did before. Conservatives on 9, no change, as Nicholas Bourne with his team has put him back in his seat and go on to look at what's happening to Mike German's Liberal Democrats. They may be down 1. Really not much change expected in Wales if this opinion poll is anyone here, right? Plaid Cymru 15, down 2 again. Ian Wyn-Jones there, proud of what he did in 1999, looking for more gains here, but on the whole, if the opinion poll's right, perhaps not doing too well. And the others on 1 there. So let's just look at that chamber. There's the winning post there. You need 31 to have an overall majority of the 60. Labour just within reach of it. It's going to be touch and go as whether they need to have a coalition with the Liberal Democrats again, David.
We're joined by Gita O'Hara again from Cardiff. Gita, you were hearing from Peter Hain of the wonders of the money that's spent in Wales, as indeed we hear always about the wonders of the money spent in Scotland, none of it spent in England. What do you make of the state of devolution? Is Wales still getting a superior deal to England?
Well, I think it's a sort of work in progress, if you use Brian Taylor's phrase, or you look at the Welsh Assembly as an adolescent, if you want. It hasn't grown up into an adult yet, but would the people of Wales prefer to go back to some sort of childhood bliss? Probably not at this stage. They'll take it with the rough and the smooth. Just 3 results in so far, 2 of them suggesting business as usual. Montgomery, that great big chunk in the middle of Wales, has remained loyal to the Liberal Democrats. Newport East, part of the industrial southeast of Wales, just a little east of here, stayed loyal to Labour. And then
quite a spectacular result for Labour in Islwyn. One of those great big heartlands that they lost to Plaid Cymru 4 years ago has come...
All right. Well, Heartland seems to have had lightning strike. Let's leave Wales then for the moment. Let's come back to the overall national picture. I've been joined here by Lord Falconer, the Home Office Minister, friend of Tony Blair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Eric Pickles, local government in the regions for the Tories, and Matthew Taylor, the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman. I suppose, Lord Falconer, Gordon Brown's hopes of becoming Prime Minister are getting dimmer and dimmer by the day. I mean, your friend's going to stay Prime Minister through the next election and on.
Well, should we talk for a moment about the local elections?
Well, let's just answer that question and then go on to the local elections.
There is absolutely no suggestion of any change as far as the Prime Minister is concerned. I think he broadly has the support of the country, and that's a good thing.
OK, and now local elections?
Picture of no surge at all towards the Tories. Mid-term, the year before the 2001 election, they were getting about 38% in the local elections. I'm not sure they've done that well this time.
How have they gained over 300 seats if there's no surge towards them? And how have you lost 460 so far?
We're in mid-term, they've made progress, but they haven't remotely made progress up to the level that Mr Hague had got them in the year before the general election.
Okay.
And Mr Hague wasn't altogether a successful leader of the Conservative Party in electoral terms.
OK, Eric Pickles?
Well, I think probably Charlie is used to defending the dumb, so he's used to defending the indefensible. I mean, we are now up 300 seats. We now are the largest party in England so far as local government is concerned. We're probably going to take 20 councils tonight. We've got spectacular results in my own county of Essex, taken Chelmsford, taken seats from Labour, from Lib Dems and from Independents. And these are way above our expectations, and I think it's been a bad night for the Labour Party, who are on their way, I think, to have a worse result than the winter of discontent.
Everything fine for the Tories. Michael Gove, Michael Gove of the Times was responsible for writing one of these reports on what's it called? Sea change.
Sea change.
Yes, sea change. Do you think the Tories can take comfort from this and don't need to rethink what they're up on about, and don't need to take any account of this challenge to the leadership?
No, it's not a comforting result for the Conservatives, actually. Overall, we've seen a slow erosion in the Labour vote since 1997, with every election that's passed. This is another slow erosion in that vote, but it's really only one or two chips off the edge of the Labour vote. The other thing is that the Tory gains tonight, 300 councils, it sounds impressive, but if you look at their share of the vote, 34% isn't impressive, particularly when you look at the turnout. Only a third of people voted in these elections. The lower the turnout, the better the Conservatives do. A lower turnout flatters them. In that sense, the Conservative scale of advance is very, very far away from making them effective challengers for government, particularly when you look at the Liberal Democrats' success. It's not sweeping, and Matthew, of course, may come to put a particularly favourable gloss on it in a minute, but the Liberal Democrats are winning in areas where the Tories should win if the Tories are ever going to form a government in the foreseeable future.
Just before I bring Matthew Taylor in, do you think that the Liberal Democrats could end up as the second party at the general election if the Tories are in the difficulties you describe?
No, I think that's highly unlikely, but I think that the success of the Liberal Democrats in a variety of areas, including, as I understand, Windsor and Maidenhead, and also in the seat that covers where Virginia Bottomley happens to be the MP, their success there indicates that the Tories simply aren't sweeping up discontented Labour voters in the numbers they require to be effective challengers for government. Sure, they're winning over some people, but not nearly enough.
Matthew Taylor.
Well, on the results tonight, it looks like the Liberal Democrats are on course to win the seats of the Conservative Shadow Chancellor, the Conservative Chair, the former Conservative Chair, former Conservative Health Secretary who just heard mentioned, and many others as well. And if you look at the overall result, what we see above all tonight is the absolute establishment now. And I used to argue on these programmes it might happen. Now it has happened. This is a three-party system, all the parties challenging. You're seeing us tonight gaining control in 9 councils from both Conservative and the Labour Party. You're seeing the party consolidate both against the Conservatives in seats that we can win from them, and some remarkable results against Labour, winning places we weren't even on the list, places like Durham and York.
Okay, Eric Pickles, you're itching to come
Well,
in again after what Matthew Gove said.
We took control of. Looks like we're going to take control of Guildford. We're taking seats away from Liberal Democrats in Somerset. I mean, tonight all the predictions were the Liberal Democrats would overtake us in terms of number of gains. They're not going to come close to that.
Okay.
They couldn't field the number of candidates, and I have to say, you know, just a second, Michael. What you've got to understand is, you know, people like you don't understand an awful lot about what's going on the grassroots. We managed to field 2,000 more candidates than either Labour or the Liberal Democrats. That means we've got activists in the field better than the other political parties. And that's the kind of growth, not from think tanks, but from real people, real Conservatives.
But on the ground, in two places which are middle-class towns in Britain, a middle-class city, Bristol, a middle-class town, Watford, the Liberal Democrats are leapfrogging over the Conservatives.
All right.
That should not be happening.
Okay, stop.
Hold
on if you would. Tony King, very briefly, summary of this and the point about the Tories fielding so many candidates. Does it show they're better grounded?
Labour needs to bear in mind that it's got a real problem with its traditional core working class support. A lot of that is flaking away. On the Conservative side, the share of the vote matters. 34%. They're winning on very small swings, with the Liberal Democrats taking votes from Labour.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed. It pretty much wraps it up. Let's just have a final look at how things stand at this stage of the in. We haven't got everything in yet, but this is how it looks. There are the councillors. Conservatives over 300 up. Labour nearly 500 down. Liberal Democrats up over 100. In councils, 19 Tory gains, 20 Tory losses, Labour losses, I should say. Liberal Democrats up 4. And here's the summary of how it looks. Conservatives have gained over 300 seats. Result that some describe as seeing them treading water. Labour suffer losses, but escape relatively unscathed. The Liberal Democrats, a success story, gaining over 100 seats. Well, there'll be much more comment on all of this on BBC News 24, and I think the President of the United States to follow. So from all of us here, goodbye.
BBC World Service Radio, now available throughout the UK. BBC World Service Radio is now available on DAB digital radio, online, digital satellite, cable and now Freeview. For more information call 08700 10 10 10.
Now on BBC One, just before we join BBC News 24, a late look at the holiday weather with Michael Fish.
Hello there. Yes, you've guessed it. The weather knows it's a holiday weekend, and of course it's going to be unsettled. So where can you go for some sunshine? Well, really not all that far away. Just head for the more southern parts of Europe and down to the Mediterranean, because there's a large area of high pressure there, in contrast to the low pressure and loads of isobars that we have across the British Isles and into northern Europe. So it's reflected in the weather. It's going to be warm and sunny in the eastern Mediterranean, with temperatures, as you see there, well into the 70s. Now, the Canary Islands is usually a sunspot, but it certainly hasn't been recently. In fact, they have had 25 millimetres of rain in the last 24 hours, well over the whole of the average for the month of May. And it is normally fairly dry at this time of year. It's the driest month in the summer as compared to the winter. But of course, it's never guaranteed to be completely dry. But over the weekend, I think it's looking a little bit better. There'll be some patches of cloud, there'll be a stiff breeze, but it should at least be reasonably sunny. The more western parts of the Mediterranean and Europe are also cheering up and getting brighter and drier and sunnier. So it's the southern parts of Europe where the weather's going to be best, warm and sunny as you see, and the more northern parts of Europe less settled with some cloudy spells and some outbreaks of rain. Looking across the other side of the Atlantic, we pick up on the satellite picture some very dark and angry looking cloud. In fact, there's been some very heavy rain and some quite nasty thunderstorms there. You can see the whole lot's been developing on the radar, heading up towards the Great Lakes and eventually down towards the eastern seaboard. Also some pretty heavy rain you'll notice across Florida. Now that's fairly usual. The rain further north due to that area of low pressure, that'll be moving out of the way. High pressure following along behind, so at least for the eastern part of the United States it should be fine and dry, but it's a different story in the west with low pressure keeping it rather unsettled. Miami, well, of course, they have rain right the way through the year. The wettest months of all, though, are August and September, but pretty wet nevertheless in between. And the temperature really sticks around a fairly humid and sticky 30 degrees. You can see that here. In fact, the whole of the south of the United States will have a warm and sticky weekend. It cools off as one goes further and further north. So let's look at some cities for you. Atlanta and Jacksonville both having those thundery showers, whereas further north it'll be warm and sunny. Into the Caribbean too, warm and sunny throughout the weekend, but it's not going to be here. We have that area of low pressure to contend with, and indeed we have further areas of low pressure coming along from time to time right the way through the weekend. So a word of warning if you're thinking of taking a small boat out, it is going to be very windy from time to time. In fact, as we'll see in a minute, there could well be gales or severe gales, and that equally applies to hill walkers. Do prepare for heavy rain every now and again and some strong winds. Now, on the theme of strong winds, we're in for some stormy weather. It is going to be later on in the day, I think, across the southernmost parts of England, where winds could well gust up to 55 miles an hour. They start in the south, they increase and increase, and then eventually they swing round more to the southwest and then to the west. You see the way those gales squeeze up the channel during the second half of the day. So the day starts off pretty wet in many parts of the country. There's heavy rain working its way northwards during the course of the day. Brighter weather following along behind, but with those blustery showers and indeed strong winds. Parts of Northern Ireland may not see the worst of the rain, but it is going to be quite chilly in the north. Scotland ending up wet and windy. Whereas in the south, once the sun breaks through, we could well see 15 degrees. The best day of all is going to be Saturday, although even on Saturday in the more western and later northern parts of the country, there will be rain moving in from the Atlantic, but eastern areas and southern areas doing not too bad, dry and bright with some sunshine. This weather front, though, will cause problems, I think, on Sunday and produce a band of outbreaks of rain. Southeastern areas, some sunshine, maybe the odd thundery shower, fair number of showers in that northwestern part of the country, and by Monday it's going to be fresher everywhere with a good scattering of heavy showers. But wherever you're going, have a lovely time, and from me, a very good night.
He's my husband, my hero, my lying, cheating ex. She's the enemy, the thorn in my side, the witch who wrecked my marriage. And one of these days, I'll so get even.
Hairdressers at War in Work and Love, the new series of Cutting It, starts Tuesday at 9 on BBC One.
The new issue of the Radio Times contains full details of forthcoming BBC programmes, together with complete listings for all major free-to-air and other television channels.
Don't step in the cracks.
Do you have what it takes to be a foster carer? If you care, call 020 7972 3900 and find out more about fostering.
You know her face.
She was pregnant.
She's a man.
When I was 8 years old, I saw it for the first time.
You know her name.
She lives in a humidified, air-conditioned concrete box.
Find out who she really is and what she's smiling about. Alan Yanto presents A Secret Life of the Mona Lisa, Sunday at 7 on BBC One.
Now on BBC One, we join BBC News 24 to the night.
At this point in our programming, we welcome viewers who've just joined us on BBC One. Good morning. Our headlines. Gains for the Conservatives in the local elections, but a Conservative frontbencher says his leader should go. Crispin Blunt resigns from his job and calls for Ian Duncan Smith to be ousted. No joy for Labour. It loses control of Birmingham for the first time in 20 years. The Liberal Democrats get their highest vote in local elections. Gains for the far-right British National Party. It becomes the second party on one council. Good morning, you're watching BBC News 24 with me, Peter Dobby. Let's show you the scene live now on board the USS Abraham Lincoln, because we're expecting that keynote address from the US President George Bush. He's set to declare that the fighting in Iraq is, in effect, essentially over, but he will stop short of declaring victory in a speech in just a few minutes' time. We understand the President will say the major combat operations have ended. Live now to Washington and Catty Kay.
And we're waiting here for shots of President Bush. He arrived on the USS Lincoln, this huge aircraft carrier, a few hours ago, and it was a dramatic sight as his jet landed at 150 miles an hour on the runway there. And he came out of this plane smiling like I think I've never seen him smile before, dressed in this jumpsuit. The cares of war seem to have been shed from him, and now he's just been introduced. We can see him there on the screen. And he's going to be coming out, walking past the ranks of the people on the board the ship there. There he is. He's changed his jumpsuit for a suit and tie, and I wonder if he's going to look less relaxed for it, because it really was an extraordinary political scene earlier as he arrived, almost as if this was the beginning of his re-election campaign, a moment of victory for him. In the speech, he's going to be thanking the troops. He's going to be saying that the coalition is still hunting for leaders of Saddam Hussein's regime. And they're going to also say that the coalition's begun the search for weapons of mass destruction. And here he is, the president.
Be seated, please. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Admiral Kelly, Captain Card, officers and sailors of the USS Abraham Lincoln, my fellow Americans, major combat operations in Iraq have ended. In the Battle of Iraq, the United States and our allies have prevailed. And now our coalition is engaged in securing and reconstructing that country. In this battle, we have fought for the cause of liberty and for the peace of the world. Our nation and our coalition are proud of this accomplishment. Yet it is you, the members of the United States military, who achieved it. Your courage, your willingness to face danger for your country and for each other made this day possible. Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free. Operation Iraqi Freedom was carried out with a combination of precision and speed and boldness the enemy did not expect and the world had not seen before. From distant bases or ships at sea, we sent planes and missiles that could destroy an enemy division or strike a single bunker. Marines and soldiers charged to Baghdad across 350 miles of hostile ground. In one of the swiftest advances of heavy arms in history, you have shown the world the skill in the might of the American Armed Forces. This nation thanks all the members of our coalition who joined in a noble cause. We thank the armed forces of the United Kingdom, Australia, and Poland, who shared in the hardships of war. We thank all the citizens of Iraq who welcomed our troops and joined in the liberation of their own country. And tonight, I have a special word for Secretary Rumsfeld, for General Franks, and for all the men and women who wear the uniform of the United States. America is grateful for a job well done. The character of our military through history, the daring of Normandy, the fierce courage of Iwo Jima, the decency and idealism that turned enemies into allies is fully present in this generation. When Iraqi civilians looked into the faces of our servicemen and women, they saw strength and kindness and goodwill. When I look at the members of the United States military, I see the best of our country, and I'm honored to be your Commander-in-Chief.